live show. You're here to break it all down. Going over the latest NFL news with Aaron Rodgers, rule changes, the Bengals signing T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. We're here to break that down as well. Going over the 2015 redraft, Mel Kiper, the worst, the best. You're not going to want to miss it. And lastly, we'll end by breaking down the amalgamation of the Thunder going from Kevin Durant, the big three of the Thunder, into where they are now. You're not going to want to miss it here. But the NFL, free agency, running rampant. The Bengals, were they going to sign T. Higgins? Were they not? They end up signing him and Jamar Chase to both $40 million annually and 4 years, $116 million for Mr. T. Higgins. Bengals got it done.
Yeah, they got it done here. Now the question is, are the Bengals gonna have a team after they do this? And I know you can be like Joe Burrow, T. Higgins versus Jamar Chase. That'll be enough to get it done. But in the Super Bowl, it wasn't enough to get it done when you just had Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase with the Super Bowl caliber defense that just went around and shut down the Chiefs in a second half. And you didn't really have an offensive line there. But now it's like you better be very good at drafting over the next few years, and it better have been Lou Anarumo's fault. But now you're going to end up losing Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard retired, and now basically 75% of your cap is going to three players at this point.
Yeah, 75%. They have $50 million dedicated to the defense. Their number one player was Trey Hendrickson, and he's probably out the door. They can't pay all four of these guys. I mean, ultimately, what they're trying to do is what you do in Madden with no salary cap, just signing everybody to every deal that they want. I felt like they could have replaced T. Higgins. Jamar Chase, I don't think they should have definitely signed him. But I feel like T. Higgins is like, even though he's really good, I still feel like he's a replaceable player. I like that the wide receiver they drafted last year. I think he would have been a fine replacement for him, or they could have gone in the draft further. But I don't know. I feel like T. Higgins should have left honestly and gone somewhere else because I feel like he would have not only showed what kind of receiver he could be, but also I feel like he probably could have got more money at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, he definitely could have got more money at the end of the day. And you're looking at it from the Cincinnati Bengals perspective. It's like, how is this team gonna really legitimately compete over the next few years? Because people are like, okay, you need to do right by Joe Burrow and put a team around him that can compete. It's like, well, wait a minute. When you look at someone like Mahomes and someone like Brady, they really only have one or two guys that's their guy in their team, but they're not making like top dollar. Maybe one of them is like a Rob Gronkowski and Travis Kelsey, but eventually you have to come to a decision where you have to choose between one of them. So it would make sense to still keep Tyreek Hill and or still keep Jamar Chase. And Jamar Chase is still dynamic enough for that Cincinnati Bengals team where you'll be able to pick up people who want to play with you in free agency. You've done really well over the past decade in the draft. I mean, you have Mohamed Sanu, AJ Green on this team coming to the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, you drafted a lot of really good players. So it's like, I feel like with T. Higgins, like we didn't really need to do this. And now I just have my questions on how they can really compete over the next few years when this really hasn't been a winning NFL strategy in the past, where we're going to just overwhelm you with offense and our offensive line is bad and we don't have a defense who can stop you. Like that's not a winning formula, especially in the AFC when you have a Texans team that's coming on right now. You have other teams making moves and you still have the Kansas City Chiefs there. You have the Buffalo Bills who are still loading up. You sign players like Joey Bosa here. They're going to get better on offense through the draft. So it's like if you don't draft well or you have one bad year in the draft, it's basically like, okay, yeah, we're not going to compete this year.
Yeah, they're screwed. They have to hit on all their draft picks. Their margin of error is super low. Not only that, you have a Ravens defense which wasn't great last year, but there's still a lot of great players on the Ravens defense. You have the Steelers, which are a great defense all around. And then even Cleveland, like they have the Miles Garrett's of the world, they have the Grant Delpits and the Denzel Wards. Ultimately, their trial of error with their offense is zero. If they can't score 30 points, they're not going to win this game. And especially if they lose Trey Hendrickson, this defense is going to be downright pathetic at this point. So it's kind of tragic because we have Joe Burrow, who ultimately at one point was looking like going to be the next guy to go toe to toe with Mahomes. But his defense, his team, the Bengals, the city of Cincinnati has ultimately let him down. And it wasn't through a lack of performance on his part, which I think is the ultimate killer. It kind of reminds me of like what happened with Drew Brees with the Saints, where he just was constantly bombarded with terrible defenses. You give him a good defense one year, he makes a Super Bowl. So I don't know. I just don't want to see his prime ruined because of it, especially with a guy that's had injury issues in the past.
Yeah, and the thing with Drew Brees is like, well, people are like, oh, I don't want to see Joe Burrow turn to Drew Brees. Like, you don't want to see Joe Burrow turn to Drew Brees. Like, first of all, like Joe Burrow has to win a Super Bowl first before he can be in the same class as Drew Brees because Drew Brees like set most statistical stats before Brady just decided to play half a decade longer than everybody else so he could break every single stat and then retire. But Drew Brees is like pretty much breaking every stat, and Joe Burrow will be similar. But like Drew Brees went out there, won a Super Bowl in a tough era. And the thing that disappoints me with the Cincinnati Bengals is we saw what happens last year when you have a dynamic offense with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase there, and your defense is terrible. And now your defense is probably going to be bad over the next few years. Lou Anarumo is a great offensive coordinator. I don't necessarily think last year is his fault with what I've seen him do with how they perform the playoffs. And I feel like he's gotten those defenses to overachieve, if anything, in the past there. So it's like we already saw last year if we score 38 points, we still might lose the game. And that didn't happen just once. There are multiple times where the Bengals scored over 30 points and still lost the game.
Yeah, and now they're screwed ultimately. I don't think they make the playoffs next year, especially when you have a team like the Patriots who've gotten better. The Chargers are still in the mix. The Broncos have gotten a lot better this draft. And then ultimately, you still have a team like the Colts that are looming around. So I just think the Bengals are in a really bad spot right now. And whether or not this comes back to bite them, we'll see. But I don't think it's going to be good for their team long term. They should have moved on from T. Higgins, sign Jamar Chase, keep Joe Burrow, and then rebuild their team ultimately because that's what they have to do.
Yeah,
But
and you could have traded him too because like with Burrow too, I don't think Burrow needs this much help. I really don't. I really think like if you're a quarterback to the level of Joe Burrow, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, you need one really good weapon and then a complete offense around them with a good offensive line, a run game, solid tight ends, solid ones and twos, and then that one explosive playmaker you know you can go to break the game open. But you have the complete team around them. It's like now you have three guys and you're just kind of looking around at an empty house. And Fresh Prince of Bel Air all over again.
the thing that kills me also is like we have plenty of teams that would have traded maybe not a first round pick for T. Higgins, but multiple seconds. Like the team like the Patriots who try to overpay for Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin says no. And then there's a number of other players. They're in on Cooper Cup. Cooper Cup's not interested. We have Chris Godwin. We have the Kelvin Ridleys of the world in years past. Patriots are dying for a receiver. They would have traded a second round pick to get T. Higgins easily, which is what they drafted him at. And they would have given him the biggest contract of anybody on the market. They're starving for wide receivers, and they don't even call the Patriots at this point. And then there's plenty of other teams. The Titans, would they have been interested? They're about to draft their quarterback. They could have used him. And just I can use a million examples of other teams that could have given you some draft capital where you could have gone after them, maybe got an offensive lineman for Joe Burrow, or better yet, get somebody on the defensive side to replace Trey Hendrickson. Like they could have done this better. And now I just feel like they've set back like at least 2 to 3 years for Joe Burrow to truly compete again.
Yeah, and we'll see if he can compete again right now because I don't know. Like the Cincinnati Bengals, it's like they're a franchise that kind of got to the playoffs once every 4 years, but they're not giving me a lot of hope. But they gave Joe Burrow what he wanted because Joe Burrow said there'd be problems if T. Higgins and Jamar Chase weren't back. So we'll see if it pans out for the Cincinnati Bengals. But this isn't a team that I've been a hater of. Like I support the Cincinnati Bengals. Like I think Joe Burrow is the second best quarterback in the league. So it's no shade towards them. It's just when you let the player dictate what you want to do and kind of pressure you in a certain direction, it's like, okay, I guess you do want to keep Joe Burrow happy. And is winning a Super Bowl more important or is keeping Joe Burrow on your team more important? Just keeping his weapons there because it seems like that's what he wanted. It's the LeBron thing where it's like LeBron kind of creates a mess and then leaves because LeBron isn't a good GM.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see what happens with Joe Burrow and the Bengals. But other NFL news, we have Aaron Rodgers media talking all about how he's holding hostage the New York Giants, the Steelers, and then at one point they were talking about the Vikings. We talked about in the show how much excitement it would be if he went to the Vikings, fulfilling the Brett Favre arc. We know that in years later he might potentially commit tax fraud, um, in the like Brett Favre did ultimately. But at this point, it's between the Steelers and Giants. Aaron Rodgers making his decision as he's done the last decade, very slowly, taking his time, taking the ayahuasca, smoking the hookah, whatever it might be. Giants and Steelers, Aaron Rodgers, where would you prefer he go?
Yeah, definitely the Steelers. The thing with this whole narrative that's really weird to me is that the entire NFL media, you have all these 50-year-old boomers and people in their 60s like, I can't believe Aaron Rodgers is holding NFL teams hostage. It's like, from what? Aaron Rodgers is holding you hostage? Like, what do you mean? Is he like forcing you to consider him as your only option for quarterback and you can't make your decision for quarterbacks? If Aaron Rodgers doesn't necessarily make up his mind, want to go you can't make up a plan or a direction for your franchise. Like, he's a free agent. He can choose to go wherever he wants. And guess what? Who else is out there? What, do you want to trade for Will Levis? Is Carson Wentz on your mind for quarterback? Oh, if Aaron Rodgers, if I knew he was going to be gone, I would have traded for Carson Wentz and given up a 6th round pick for him. Like, who is he holding you hostage from? Like, the draft isn't for another few months, and he's a 40-year-old quarterback. So if you're the Steelers, it would make sense if you want to compete now. You either want a young quarterback and you want to draft one, or you don't. Or you want a 2-year solution with Aaron Rodgers at best, but I really only think he plays another year in the NFL. If he goes to the Steelers, maybe he plays 2. If he goes to the Giants, maybe he plays another year and then decides, oh, maybe I'll retire. Tried both New York teams, didn't end up working out for me. But like, Aaron Rodgers is holding you hostage. Like, n- we're all adults here, right? Like, when did we all in the room talking right now stop being adults? Like, their NFL teams, like, if Aaron Rodgers making up his mind is holding them hostage, like, sorry, maybe you're just bad at running an NFL organization.
Yeah, and the Giants have proven that already. They have it on video how bad they are at running their organization. In my mind, I don't know why the Giants are interested in him ultimately. I mean, I know the answer, right? Both the GM and the coach is on the hot seat. That makes sense why. But like you saw what happened with the Jets and how much of a disaster it was going to the Jets. A team that is equally as dysfunctional and equally as disappointing the last decade, the Giants. Why would you want to replicate that? Like as if it's not going to be a disaster there too. The only difference is like the Giants have Malik Neighbors, they have a better head coach, maybe some better players on defense ultimately, but they're not going to do anything in that division with the Eagles, Commanders there as well. And then you even have the Cowboys that play the Giants well historically. So it's like, that doesn't make any sense to me. The Steelers, it's like, okay, if he can be better than what Russ was last year, maybe they can win a playoff game. So for the Steelers, it makes more sense. I wanted the Vikings for selfish reasons, but uh, as far as them holding him up, like this is again, it's an organization. They have Russell Wilson if they want to pivot to him. They have the Carson Wentzes of the world, and there's plenty of other backup quarterbacks that they can fill in for the time being and be just fine.
Yeah, no, I just don't get like what the drama about Aaron Rodgers like taking time to make a decision is in the NFL. Like, he needs to make his decision right now or it's over. Like, oh, you mean you're in the dead zone of sports, so you need Aaron Rodgers to make an announcement so you have some news to talk about, because even though it's like you spent all of your time talking about him negatively, he still drives your dialogue and conversation and headlines for you. Like, got it. Makes sense. But if I'm Aaron Rodgers, if I'm looking at George Pickens and DK Metcalf and Mike Tomlin versus Brian Dayball and a really young but nice receiver. It's like DK is established. George Pickens is fairly established right now in the NFL. Like Malik Neighbors is still a young receiver. So I just think where Pittsburgh is at, like it's just an older team. It makes more sense for him. Cam Hayward is old. He's about to retire. TJ Watt is getting older. He's about to retire. I mean, you just signed another old corner for Pittsburgh. You have Minka there. It's a veteran team. You have Mike Tomlin. So if you have him and Russell Wilson, like it just makes more sense for him in Pittsburgh. It's just
Mm,
if he himself wants to compete.
yeah, I think Pittsburgh gives them the best opportunity to do so. So we'll see where they end up going. Another decisions to be made here. Multiple teams submitted to the NFL potential rule changes. One of them being the Green Bay Packers pushing for the Eagles to get the tush push banned. That's the big one. It would be that the rule would prevent players from pushing a teammate that is lined up directly behind the snapper and receive the snap immediately at the snap. Ultimately, trying to ban the tush push officially.
No. Like it's a NFL play. Figure out how to stop it. It's like they figured out a rule. It's like, oh, why can't you go behind a player and like push him? Like, why can't you go behind a player and push him? Like, it adds a different element to the game. It's unstoppable and it puts a lot more pressure on the defense as well, not to get to 3rd and 1. So, like, I'm fine with the tush push. And we've also seen that the tush push can be stopped and that teams don't always, and it's about how you execute it. Philadelphia just executes it better than any other team because guess what? They're the only team that does it. And then the Buffalo Bills try it versus the Kansas City Chiefs and fail it one, two, three, 4 times versus the Kansas City Chiefs in that game. And then you want to talk about a team like, can we ban teams from submitting rule changes when it has to do with another team that they lost to in the playoffs? Like, can we ban that now? If it's going to be the Colts, like, oh, they deflated the football. We lost in overtime. We didn't get a chance to get the ball. Like, anytime there's a rule change, like, it can't, like, be because that one team you lost to in the playoffs just does something better than you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the tush push, I understand why they would ban it. Like I know the Eagles conversion rate's like 90%. The rest of the league though is somewhere in the mid 70s. I think even lower than that. So it's not like it's an unstoppable play like you mentioned. Ultimately, I do think that it is going to be banned, mostly because of the injury concerns that can come from it. But that's one rule. Whether or not they ban the tush push or not, I think it'd be kind of lame, but I wouldn't. I would understand why. Um, the Lions, they submitted a change where ultimately it's no longer based on divisions, it's based on seeding in each conference. They proposed that rather than division championships, it ultimately comes down to who had the best record. Um, this obviously makes sense given what happened with them and the Vikings last year, where you had 3 teams that would have been much higher in the seedings. Ultimately, there was 2 wild card teams. Packers had to face the Eagles. Vikings, they were a wild card team, and then the Lions having that one bye there. But how would you feel about them changing it from division winners to ultimately just records
I
in
don't
each conference?
I don't like it. And I'm a fan of the Lions, but this rule change I don't like for a specific reason because at the end of the year, what do we get? Those critical divisional matchups where you have it on the line to potentially win your division and get to the playoffs. So I do think it is important just for the regular season. I feel like it would take a little bit away from those divisional games and they wouldn't mean as much because you think about the most classic regular season games happen on the last week of the regular season between 2 divisional opponents. Last year, we had the Lions and the Vikings. We had the Lions and the Packers one year. That Chargers and Raiders game that went to overtime was electric. So I feel like it would take a little bit of momentum away from the regular season. I feel like it's smart how the NFL kind of pits the divisional opponents who have know each other inside and out for that divisional crown, a home playoff game at the end of the regular season. And I feel like it just makes the divisional games more meaningful.
I would agree. I think when it comes to the divisional matchups, like I like that we have like the NFC South, for example, where granted, I know that not everyone in that division is excellent. They might not be contenders, but ultimately, like you get the battle of like the Falcons and Bucks. You have the Saints and Panthers ultimately in years past. So like, I like that they aren't ranked that way because then if you're a wild card team and let's say you're a team like the Texans, um, a team that looked ultimately vulnerable, they go through. They have an easy division. Like I think it ultimately balances itself out. We thought that the Texans were going to be an easy first round exit based on how they were performing, and then they ended up beating the Chargers. So I think the seeding's fine the way it is. We have these four divisions. If you want to rebalance the divisions from time to time, move teams around, that's fine. But I don't think the problem is the fact that there's a lot of really good teams in one division and one really bad in another. NFC North, AFC North, both of those divisions are great. But at the same time, if we split up where it's just records based, it completely takes away from that rivalry that they have internally. I feel like it's going to hurt the product a little bit if they do so.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely hurts it in the regular season, but I do think it is interesting to have it ranked here a little bit more NBA style here. NBA just has so many games though, where the NFL thrives on it just being a more finite product, and with that, you get more competitive games because you only play each other twice a year. So if one of those games means someone's getting a home playoff game and someone's potentially going home or going on the road, like that's huge. Like that's big.
Yeah. Yeah. Another proposal was eliminating automatic first downs from illegal contact or defensive holding. This was also submitted by the Lions, who ironically had the most holds all of last season.
Yeah, this should definitely be a they should definitely do that, and they need to revisit pass interference. Like pass interference needs to stop being a spot foul. It's ridiculous that you can kind of just bait a corner into leaning into you and falling on top of you, and then suddenly you just flip the field position 50 or 60 yards. Like now we're in a league where the rules are already moving towards the offense. So maybe in an era where football was a lot more physical, where you could potentially tackle a guy before he got to the ball, and that was pass interference. But in a game where it's kind of ticky tack sometimes, and they're kind of you don't really know. Should it really have that much of an impact on the game if it's pass interference? Like, how about 15 yards? Is 15 yards okay? How about 10 yards and an automatic first down? And then for holding and the other ones, it's not an automatic first down. You just pick up the extra yards. Because I feel like pass interference is one of those penalties where if we're giving all of this leeway to the offense, it's a good way to swing it back to the defense where every time you run into a guy, you're not giving up a 60-yard play. But I guess the flip side argument to that would be, well, then if someone's about to get a wide open touchdown, you could just tackle him at the one with no consequence and it'd only be 10 yards, I guess would be the argument against it.
I don't think that's a bad thing though. Ultimately, like I don't think it's good for a product when ultimately the strategy of the offense is to bomb it down the field and hope that the corners fail. And that's how they get 60 yards, especially when it comes down to like playoff implications or ultimately like this is a game that decides their seeding in the NFL. Like when it comes down to it, just a ticky tack ref call. When we've seen plenty of missed calls in the past, we've seen plenty of ticky tack fouls. Like I just feel like if it's going to be ticky tack, it shouldn't be something that flips the field 50 yards ultimately. Ultimately, as if they just connected on the play all together. If it's where it moves at 10 yards with the first down, like maybe that's different. I just think that if they're going to be so lenient on the offense, they should help the defense to some extent by um, minimizing the defensive holdings, the illegal contacts, and fixing pass interference as well. And another submission here: the Eagles want to have it so both teams get guaranteed possession. Essentially, the overtime playoff rules um, carry into the regular season. Because right now, whoever gets the ball in the regular season, if they score, the game is over. Switching it so that both teams get a guaranteed possession.
No, it's not worth it. Like regular season, I feel like it's fine just to save injuries. And with how physical and long the regular season is, like that time and wear and tear on your body adds up. So with that one, it's like extra possession sounds nice and it's good for the NFL product, I guess, because the game goes a little bit longer. But if we can avoid any unnecessary injuries in the regular season, I feel like that's good. So if we can end that game early and you didn't get it done within the first 48 minutes, okay. You had your chance. You had four other 15-minute quarters. Like, what else did you need to get it done? Like, it's the regular season, man. It's not that deep.
See, I disagree with the. I think both teams should have a possession because ultimately, especially when like imagine it's like Mahomes and Burrow, or maybe it's Jalen Hurts versus Lamar Jackson, for example. Like you have these classic battles, and it goes to overtime. One team wins a coin toss, they score, and the game is over. I just feel like it's anticlimactic for even if you're not a fan of one team or the other. I just feel like it's anticlimactic when they win the coin toss, they score, and the other team doesn't even get a chance to retaliate. If they have it so both teams can retaliate, then it becomes somewhat of a battle. I feel like college is ultimately what does it the best. They have it so ultimately they both get a possession in overtime. There's no clock, and then once when they both score, they both are essentially just going for two. And if they do that, that's how they decide it. Essentially, like what hockey does with shootouts. I feel like if they could do it that way, then that would make overtime a lot more exciting, especially when we talk about these top quarterback duels that we see, or
Yeah.
just classic games ultimately.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I guess a possession is fine. I just would rather prefer to avoid any injuries. So yeah, for me, I get why people want it, but for me, I'm fine with just one possession because the thing is, what if it's one of the? I get the argument like, well, what if it is a classic battle between Burrow or Mahomes, or we have Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson? But like again, like my argument before, it's like it's the regular season. You had four other quarters to get it done, and there was probably a drive where you made a mistake somewhere along the line where you could have corrected it and won the game. It's like sometimes it's you just get an unlucky break.
Yeah, comes down to a coin toss allegedly. I think that's pretty much it for notable rules. I think the Steelers are trying to alternate the tampering period, trying to have it so that they can start connecting with free agents sooner than the 3-day negotiating window. Um,
Okay.
that's kind of it. That part I don't think matters too much. I feel like there's legal tampering and then there's shit that goes on behind the scenes anyways. So that doesn't really move the needle for me too much, but Steelers want to update it so that it allows direct contact between pending free agents and teams that are pursuing them um, earlier than the league opening year.
What would you change?
If I could change it, I feel like just be open with it and do what everyone knows you're doing. Soon as the Super Bowl's over, you can talk. Just let it happen. Like it happens anyways. It's kind of like the NIL where everybody knows you're getting paid. In this case, everybody knows you're talking to somebody on that team. Wink, nod. Why not just make it legal? Let them talk. They want to talk. Go ahead. Maybe it's not good for the team that's trying to re-sign you, but ultimately that just drives your price up at the end of the day. I would say just make tampering legal.
Yeah. You know, I would I would change if I could change one rule in the NFL or implement a rule. If you make it
Yeah.
across the 50-yard line, you can't punt.
You know what? I like that rule. I don't think punting should happen. I think punting in general is stupid. Sorry. You're basically just giving up. Sorry, Pat McAfee. But like, if you're in the 50-yard line, you're gonna kick like a 70-yarder. Like that's sick. Like that should be a lot. That's a good thing. That's cool. That's good for the product. We saw Justin Tucker hit that 66-yarder against the Lions. Like massive field goals, especially if they can convert. Get the Brett Aubreys of the world that can make it. Like that just makes for better football.
How about this? You can either go for it and then you if you opt for a field goal, the field goal is the punt. So instead of kicking a field goal, if you end up just kicking it and then making it, you either make the field goal or you can just try and kick a field goal But if you kick it out of bounds, then they get it at like the spot where you kicked it. But if you attempt a field goal, then it's just a touchback if you miss. But so you have to at least attempt something. Like play. It's fourth down. There's four downs. Like it's not 1, 2, 3 surrender. It's fourth down. Like go out there and play.
So you're saying that if they kick a punt and it goes through the uprights, it should count as a point.
No, so if they so you can go for it on fourth down, or you can attempt a field goal if you're ahead of the if you're at the 50-yard line or ahead of it. And if the field goal misses, but it goes out of the end zone, so it doesn't fall short, it's a touchback. But if it falls in the end zone, then it's spot. The other team just gets it where you kicked it from.
Okay. I wouldn't hate an idea where they punt it, and if it goes through the uprights, it's a point. Because that means you have to fuck, especially if it's past the 50-yard line.
Just one.
Let's say you're like pinning your own end zone and you kick a fucking boot and it goes through the uprights.
True.
Like that's impressive. If that makes punters more valuable. Punters aren't valuable now, but if you get like a
Past the
Matt
40,
Ariza,
2 points. And then like
yeah,
behind the 40, it's 4 points if you punt it through the uprights.
yeah, you get like Matt Ariza for example for the Chiefs. Like he's a good punter. Tommy, who's that guy from the Raiders that everyone loves? I forget his name.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you just kick an absolute boot of a punt and it goes to the uprights. It counts as a point. I think that would be sick.
Yeah, because
Especially
imagine if you're down by 1 point and you're at a Hail Mary range, but your punter just like
his
bombs
nails.
one and you tie the game. That'd be sick.
It's kind of like hitting a 3-pointer. I feel like that would also just make the punter like imagine you just have a clutch punter.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like that'd be cool. Same with the
That's kind
kicker.
of
Like
like
I
if
don't know.
the NBA added a 4 point shot too.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like it would be good. It would make it exciting. But that's the NFL rule changes. Ultimately, we'll know about this uh, past April 2nd. Ultimately, everything that we mentioned has to get 24 votes for it to be approved. Otherwise, it will not go through. So I believe that is 75% majority for them in order for that to move forward. Hopefully, at least some changes are made because I think that overtime should be updated. The tush push, I think that's going to be a controversial one. And then the tampering period. We'll see where they go.
I think what should be updated realistically in the NFL is they need to go back in time 10 years and figure out, I wonder what caused the 2015 NFL draft to be so horrendous. I wonder what caused it to be one of the worst drafts, maybe the worst draft ever in NFL history. We should really go back and study that because when you take a look at it, there was one really good player in this draft, and everyone else is kind of a heart attack because we are recapping the 2015 NFL draft. We're going to go over the players. We're going to go over some of Mel Kiper's takes, and then we're going to go over our top 5 players from this draft. Then we're going to go over our top 5 worst players from this draft, and the list may be the same because I don't know. 2015, you have Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota as the premier quarterbacks. Neither of their careers really panned out the way anyone thought it would. And then after that, it's Amari Cooper, potentially the worst wide receiver class after that. I mean, I brought up this draft to you pre-show, and it was kind of giving you a panic attack.
It was giving me a panic attack. So, like, the thing about this draft, we went through the draft with Will Levitt, with like the really bad draft that had like Kenny Pickett and Brock Purdy and all those other guys. Like that draft had a terrible quarterback draft. This draft doesn't have any good position drafts, period. We can go through the quarterbacks and the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and then defensive players. And it's amazing. The number one running back of this draft was Todd Gurley, who unfortunately flamed out very quickly, despite being dominant for a short period of time. And then it's like the Melvin Gordons of the world. Like, and then the quarterbacks, like the best quarterbacks that were taken were Jameis and Marcus Mariota. And those guys by no means were rock stars. Like these guys, like Jameis Winston is the 30 for 30 guy. Flashes off your television screen, will be a great announcer someday. And then Marcus Mariota, like at this point, he's just like a good backup, but he's not great. Two guys that went 1-2 and 10 years into the league, like they're still playing, but they're not starting. And they haven't done like if their careers were eliminated, the NFL would be just fine. Like that's not good, especially for your number 1 and 2 picks.
No, not at all. I mean, yeah, they're not starting anywhere, and they're kind of getting old. Um, Yeah, Jameis is like literally. You talk about people walking around holding signs. I mean, he was walking around New Orleans holding a sign and on a cardboard box. Like you talk about this, and you also talk about Jameis Winston, and both of those worlds kind of collided, and everything is multiverse right now, and kind of a brickyard space time continuum. Jameis, and it's really known for being bad, and I feel like him being the number one pick really sums up this draft because it's really the 30 for 30 draft.
Yeah, it doesn't get prettier either. The third pick, it was Dante Fowler. He gets drafted by the Jags. He plays for the Jags for 2.5 seasons before the Rams go and get him. And he wasn't a part of the Super Bowl winning team, but they didn't end up making a Super Bowl with them. He's kind of bounced around the league. He had a comeback season actually with the Commanders this past season, but
Good
ultimately
player.
Dante Fowler as the number 3 pick. Amari Cooper, he's still playing. Um, Played a little bit with the Bills this past season. Not really the same receiver he once was, but at his best, he was a really good receiver. I think I would say he was a multi-time Pro Bowler. He played for the Cowboys. He was good for the Cowboys. John Gruden loved him too. But I still feel like there's probably better wide receivers that could be taken. But Mark Cooper,
Ahead of him in this draft? Who? Like, I think he's the best player, like, that the Raiders, like, for what they needed. Like, honestly, like, we went over a draft where they took, like, two players and we had no idea who they were, and they took them back to back. Like, for the Raiders, taking Amari Cooper at number 4 when they've taken, like, Hunter Renfro in the first round, like, for them, that's a pretty good pick.
oh, it's a great pick for the Raiders, especially because like later on, like there's another wide receiver that was torn between and he didn't pan out. Number 5, Brandon Sheriff. He's still playing offensive tackle. Leonard Williams with the Jets. He played. He pretty much played out his rookie contract with them. Signed with the Giants later on, and now he's bounced around with the Seahawks. Um, and then Kevin White, one of the biggest bust wide receivers maybe ever. He had 28 catches um, in his entire career, 245 yards for the Bears.
Was he
And
with Cutler?
yeah, he was with Cutler. And he's actually related to Kaiser White, ironically enough. But yeah, horrendous wide receiver. Taken 7th overall, did absolutely nothing. He now works at Burger King. Pretty embarrassing. And then rounding out the top 10, we have Vic Beasley for the Falcons, Eric Flowers with the Giants. You can imagine where that's going to go. And then Todd Gurley, who is probably the best player in this draft, at least at his peak. At his peak, this dude was the best running back in the league for like a solid 2 or 3 years. And then Sean McVay just completely grinded his knees to absolute sawdust. And then remaining in this first round, we had notable players like Devontae Parker for the Dolphins. He was a fine receiver. Melvin Gordon, another solid running back. We had like Eric Armstead, Marcus Peters, Nelson Aguilar, Bud Dupree, DJ Humphreys, Shaq Thompson, Laken Thompson, and the infamous Philip Dorsett to round out the first round.
Wow. Yeah, and then second round we get like Landon Collins, TJ Yeldon at running back. That's kind of a pull there. Then you also have Dorial Green Beckman, just a good name, I guess. And then you have Devin Funchess there.
Oh, God.
Eric Kendricks is a good linebacker from Minnesota. Eric Rowe, Denzel Perryman.
Yeah, you got the Ronald Darbys of the world. Frank Clark was in this draft. We go to the third round. Tyler Lockett, who Seahawks legend, just recently got cut by the Seahawks, but ultimately a Seahawks legend. We got notable players like Jordan Hicks. We got Ty Montgomery. Um, and then we go into the fourth round. Trey Flowers is here. So a lot of like fine players. Zadarius Smith, I still see here in the fourth round. Like players that are still playing, but it feels like a majority of this draft at this point have fizzled out ultimately.
Yeah, especially like Marcus Peters being drafted. I feel like his career ended pretty quickly. Had a lot of injury issues, a lot of ankle issues, and then with this draft, it just feels like a lot of good depth. Like you have players like Ronald Darby in there, solid players like Eric Kendricks. You have Amari Cooper there. You have Todd Gurley, but like kind of like the great players in this draft fizzled out quickly and had a quick peak. And then there's just like a lot of good depth players, but there's a lot of really bad just whiffs in this draft. And I don't think there's too much else we really need to dwell on with at least the players drafted here. But if you're looking at the top of this draft, is there anything that jumps out like, okay, if I'm this team, this pick makes a lot more sense for them?
Yeah, I think like for example, the Bears took Kevin White, who was a massive wide receiver bust, did nothing in the NFL. But their options were like Nelson Aguilar and Devontae Parker. Would have made the Bears a little better. Let's keep in mind like who were the Bears then? They just gotten off of their season with um ultimately they had um Jay Cutler on that team. They went 6-10. John Fox was on that team, and ultimately, with how bad that draft was, they ended up going 3-13 to follow. Kevin White was a massive disappointment for them, and was honestly just a complete disaster from there. Now, for this draft, like if I'm looking at it positionally wise, the quarterbacks we have like Jameis, Marcus Mariota, and then like later on we have like Brett Hundley, Trevor Simeon, terrible quarterback draft. Running
Damn, Brett
backs was like,
Hundley's that old?
yeah, Brett Hundley's old, dude.
I didn't realize that when he was on the Ravens. Like when he played with the Ravens like a couple of years ago, I thought he was like kind of a rookie they had recently drafted to back up Lamar. I didn't realize that he was in the league before Lamar.
No, he's an old man. And then like running backs, we have Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, TJ Yeldon, Amir Abdullah, another guy that I didn't know was that old. Duke Johnson, David Johnson, Jay
David
Ajayi.
Johnson. Talk about talk about someone that burned you.
Yeah. He didn't burn me. He burned the Cardinals. I mean, the fact that they traded D Hop for David Johnson, or no,
Yeah,
vice versa. The fact that the
burned the
Texans traded him,
Texans.
what a disaster that was. And then notable wide receivers, we have like Amari Cooper. Later in the draft, there's Stephon Diggs. Darren Waller would go to tight end eventually, but like all of the receivers were atrocious. I mean, I'm looking at it here. We got we have Brashard Perriman. We have Chris Connolly, Jamison Crowder, who I thought honestly was older than this. I thought Jamison Crowder was 46 last time I saw him. No, he's still playing. Um,
Braxton Berrios.
Braxton Berrios, Deron Brown. We just have a bunch of really like the receiver core. Like we talk about the 2016 draft that has like the Odells of the world, and we have, I believe Cooper Cup was in that draft. We talk about some of these great wide receiver drafts, and the number one wide receiver here is Amari Cooper and Stephon Diggs. All
And
these other
Tyler
guys,
Lockett.
Nelson Aguilar is known for not having hands. That's what he's known for. He's known for having butterfingers,
Yeah.
ultimately, and stealing money from the Patriots. That's it. That's what they're known for. Tight end
Yeah,
drafts
Tyler
are a joke.
Lockett's probably the third best receiver in this draft.
Yeah, so it's bad. And then like, yeah,
Ty Montgomery.
there's not like a known beast defensive player either. Like, there's no Miles Garrett. There's no Aaron Donald. There's Zadarius Smith, Daniil Hunter, maybe. but like there's no stud defensive player that's going to go down as like the best at that position of all time.
Yeah, not the best. I'd say like Ronald Darby was like one of the best corners at one point. He was at least in the conversation.
Hmm. At one point. But yeah, this draft, there's a lot of bad. There's not a whole lot of excellence in this draft by any means. Offensive lineman, decent, but yeah,
Yeah, there's
just
not a
kind of flamed out. But this
best
2015
player
draft,
in my unit. There's not a
huh,
best player in my unit player. Maybe Amari Cooper at one point with the Raiders. Um, like he was the best player there, but like really, I feel like Amari Cooper and then Todd Gurley are the best players in this draft. But like Todd Gurley's career is still cut short. Like the best player in this
super.
draft could have gone down in historic fashion, but like just didn't have the didn't have the genetics for the game, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of the worst things that we could have seen. Todd Gurley, he was on pace to be like an Adrian Peterson. He could have been in that conversation like what we saw with Derrick Henry and some of these other guys, but his knees like disintegrated. It was just really sad to see. I feel like after that Super Bowl run, he was never the same.
Yeah, it's tough. But yeah, overall, probably the worst draft in NFL history. Because even in that Kenny Pickett draft, I feel like we still had a lot of other great players drafted in that draft. We had like Jameer Gibbs in that draft. The Lions got him and Aiden Hutchinson, I believe, in that draft. So that was a massive draft for them. It's like a lot of other good players. Like, okay, teams are like really building here with this draft. It's like I guess you added some depth.
Yeah, you got a Bud Dupree. That's it. Yeah, it's a shame. This draft, not a lot of great, but um, we still should do, our like we do with every other draft, alternate reality, right? When we did the 2022 draft, who went where? It's interesting to see in the world of Mel Kiper, in the Mel Kiper universe, we saw worlds where you wouldn't even dream of what happens. So now in the 2015 draft, looking back, what did he say was going to go where? I'm going to skip over the first two picks because everybody knew Jameis and Marcus were going first and second. In this alternate reality, Mel Kiper's final mock draft of 2015, he had Amari Cooper going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. There's a reality where Blake Bortles is throwing to Allen Robinson and Amari Cooper. That team could have potentially made the Super Bowl.
I mean, yeah, Blake Bortles, wow, what a underrated quarterback. Someone who is, I guess, really underappreciated, some people feel now. There's been a lot of revisionist history with Blake Bortles where there's like been some weird, like sneaky fan pages who have started to creep up now that it's been a while since he played and been like, see, Blake Bortles wasn't that bad, right? He got to a conference championship. Maybe he was better than Trevor.
No, he wasn't. He was ass. Blake Bortles was terrible. Let's not forget, just because it's been a decade, it's the same people who fantasize about various things. It's just, yeah, no, he was not good. Let's not forget that he was buns for the Jags, and they did not do anything except for that 1 year. So let's not forget that.
Yeah.
Alternate reality as well. The Falcons drafted Bud Dupree in this draft. In the Mel Kiper uh, universe, doesn't sound interesting now, but remember, the Falcons made the Super Bowl the following year in 2016. Bud Dupree on that team, good linebacker, better defensive team ultimately. That would have been that could have been interesting for the Falcons. Maybe they don't blow the 28-3 lead potentially.
Yeah, but Dupree's fine though. He's not that good. He's not change your world with Brady. There's a reason why Pittsburgh didn't want him. There's a reason why every other offseason they send all their linebackers they don't need to the Titans and they happily sign them.
Yeah, that is true. He would have made them a little better though. And then 9, they have the Giants drafting Todd Gurley. And here it says, yes, this is early for a running back, but Gurley is one of the best prospects in the draft and best player on the board. His fit as the Giants lacked a big threat at running back, and free agent pickup Shane Vereen is more of a part time back. So they saw through Shane Vereen signing with the Giants. Todd Gurley in this scenario, the question we ask is, would they have ended up drafting Saquon? Would they have ended up paying Todd Gurley? Would they have been better? This was still the Eli Manning universe, if we remember correctly. So would he have moved the needle at all for the Giants had they have drafted him?
I mean, Eric Flowers was useless, so yeah.
Yeah, I would say so.
Is he a pencil that can write on paper? Okay, he's more useful than Eric Flowers.
Yeah. I think the Giants, they still would have not been very great, but it would have been a little more interesting. Saquon maybe isn't a Giant at that case. Do the Rams make the Super Bowl eventually? We don't know. And then a lot of what ifs here. Randy Gregory goes to the Saints in this universe. That's not super bizarre. Uh, they have Marcus Flowers going to the Eagles in this case, bolstering up their secondary.
Yeah, it's
Here we
just
go.
not interesting enough draft, I guess, for Mel Kiper's universe.
Yeah, the Cardinals take Melvin Gordon instead of uh, David Johnson. That could have changed something. This draft, yeah, this draft just like there's nothing exciting. Like this draft is just bad, all ways around.
Yeah.
Go talk about everybody in this draft. Nothing like if this draft just didn't exist, the NFL world would be just fine. There was a gross scenario where Tyler Lockett is a Panther in this draft, replacing Calvin Benjamin.
That makes sense. That's not gross. I mean, that's with Cam. Like, this isn't the.
Oh, true. That's true. That's right after the Super Bowl too.
Yeah.
And then the last one here, that's interesting.
Enjoy.
They put David Johnson on the Cowboys in this scenario in the third round.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting, actually. That
So
would have
this
been a good
one,
fit. Because they had a
yeah,
good O line then.
yeah, their O line was great. Plus, they in this case, it says the running back continues. Johnson is an elite player, but his size and pass catching ability are assets. Along with Darren McFadden, he can help fill the void that was left by DeMarco Murray. This is the year before Zeke. So in this scenario, they probably don't draft Zeke. David Johnson is excellent with the Cowboys' offensive line. And the Cowboys, I don't think that changes their history necessarily, but David Johnson's career would have been much better had he have gone to the Cowboys
Yeah,
behind
his
that offensive
career
line.
would have been better, but Dak wouldn't have got paid.
Yeah.
Zeke paid Dak Prescott. I mean, David Johnson had injury issues, but he would have been good enough where they wouldn't have paid Ezekiel Elliott. But the man who got Dak Prescott paid was not Dak Prescott. It was Ezekiel Elliott because there was a statistic going around for the longest time where the Dak Prescott was terrible if Ezekiel Elliott didn't rush for more than 100 yards, and their record was sub 500 when Ezekiel Elliott didn't rush for 100 plus yards. So it's like if you had David Johnson instead of him, would Dak still be like the same quarterback he is, and would he still be making more money than Josh Allen is, even though Josh Allen just got a new contract for 6 years?
Yeah, I don't believe so. I think the Cowboys would have been more exciting with David Johnson, but I think they still would have been first round exits. But the Mel Kiper universe works in mysterious ways. Unfortunately, we will never know what happens with David Johnson. But I say we talk about what was the best of the best, what was the worst of the worst. I feel like in your scenario, you doing the best of the best, it's going to be nearly impossible to find the highlights in here. So I'm going to give you that challenge now. If we're talking about the pillars of success with what might be the worst of the worst, my job is very easy. Your job is very hard. Give me the best of this draft. We need a smile before we frown.
Yeah, so the best of the best for this draft is going to be 5 NBA players that would have been better than any other players taken in this draft because this draft was so bad that there is really no one worth mentioning. So instead of mentioning a player like, oh, I think Amari Cooper was a great pick and he helped the Raiders a lot. Like, no, 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 we're not doing that bullshit. Like, oh, this team was great. And like, no, we're doing the players that would be some of the best players in the NBA today. So at number 5, Kenyon Martin. Kenyon Martin is a great power forward in the NBA. You want to talk about a guy who would have the physicality to play in the NFL? You think of this guy at tight end, maybe put him at outside linebacker, but you can just see him going out there and hitting someone. I think Kenyon Martin has all of the physical tools. He has the physicality, the mental fortitude, and the IQ and um, ability to go out there and play in the NFL. So I think Kenyon Martin could have been a really great asset for another team in the NBA. So at number 5, Kenyon Martin. At number 4, you want a really great slot receiver. You want a receiver that Brady could build upon and build a great relationship with. Well, look no further than, yes, this is going to be a deep pull for some of the kids. DJ Augustine at number 4. That's your slot receiver. You want a guy who can go in there and be better than someone like Philip Dorsett. You want to tell me that Philip Dorsett's going to be a better slot receiver than DJ Augustine? Fight me. Tell me when and where. I'll show up. I'll be there. We'll do it for the show. We'll all make a lot of money here. But DJ Augustine would be a better receiver than most of the bums taken in this draft. I mean, Nelson Aguilar taken in this draft. I mean, it was abysmal. So at number 4, we have DJ Augustine here. And then at number 3, yeah, I'm sure this is the player that everyone expected to be on this list because he is a physical freak. He is a physical specimen, and he almost played for the Dallas Cowboys. Say what you will about him, but LeBron James would be a great player. He played in high school in Ohio, and I think him at tight end, he's just better at basketball at this point. But in the NFL, I think LeBron James could definitely be better than a lot of players on this list. You put him at tight end, you put him at edge rusher, but I definitely think he'd be able to go out there and get it done. So at number 3, we have LeBron James. And then at number 2, we have someone who I think would be another really good deep threat, maybe go toe to toe with you downhill, be like a Julio Jones or DeAndre Hopkins type of option for you. But number 2, we have Jimmy Butler. I think Jimmy Butler would be a great deep threat for you where you can just get him downfield. He's going to win all of those battles for you inside and outside. Maybe he's big enough where you put him at outside linebacker in the NFL, but I feel like him at number 2 would be really good. You could put him at a deep threat. He could play safety or linebacker for you potentially. So Jimmy Butler at number 3, he has the attitude. I think he could play in the NFL better than anyone else in the 2015 draft. And then at number 1, you want to talk about a left tackle. You have a need at left tackle. You need someone who's physical enough, but also quick and agile on his feet, and a big man and tall. Well, look no further than Big Baby Davis. You want to tell me that Eric Flowers is better than Glenn Davis at left tackle? No way. So I think at number 1, you have to put Glenn Davis there because not only does he have the height, he has the size and he has the quickness and he has the hand-eye coordinates to play in the NBA, and he has the toughness there. So I definitely think that Glenn Big Baby Davis could either be on your defensive line or your offensive line and be a better option than Eric Flowers for the New York Giants. So at number 1, Big Glenn Glavy Davis. I couldn't come up with 5 players, so we're going with 5 NBA players for this one.
I'm okay with that because my list is no better or worse. It is just as great. The worst top 5 according to the Brickyard with the 2015 draft. Coming in at number 5, Todd Gurley's knees. I mean, good God, we're talking about a draft where it's Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston, and ultimately the highlight is that Todd Gurley was good for an hour before his knees turned into literal sawdust. At number 5, the worst top 5, it's Todd Gurley's knees. This could have easily been talking about the next Adrian Peterson, OJ Simpson, Walter Payton, but instead we're talking about Todd Gurley's knees. At number 4, I'm actually going to shout out myself here. My eyes. Because me going through this draft and finding what is bad, it was harder for me to find what was good than what was bad because it was all bad. Whether it was Jameis Winston throwing to the other team, whether it was Marcus Mariota fumbling, whether it was the highlight of this first round being Devontae Parker and Nelson Aguilar, my eyes have yet to recover. At number 3, I have the Cleveland Browns. Their draft was horrendous. I mean, every single person left the team within 2 years, and their highlight from this was Duke Johnson. Not David Johnson, Duke Johnson. If you are an Immaculate Grid fan, you know Duke Johnson well. At number 2, I have my pride, which I'm still trying to recover from. It hasn't recovered yet. Maybe someday it will. Um, a draft that will never go over again will be the 2015 draft. I think I would rather eat bark. I think I would rather eat cement, something that's more exciting than that. And at number 1, this entire draft, the experience of it, going through every player that was drafted, going through the what ifs, all of it was awful. I mean, this entire draft is a disgrace. I feel like um, nobody deserves to remember this draft. I think we should make this a Mandela effect. Let's pretend that Josh Allen was in this draft. Let's pretend that Aaron Rodgers was in this draft. Let's pretend that Patrick Mahomes was in this draft, but let's all forget that this draft happened because it was awful.
Yeah. No, let's definitely forget that 2015 happened. I mean, it's crazy that it's 10 years ago. I keep thinking, like, oh, yeah, 2015, 9 years ago. Like, 2015 is 10 years ago. That's insane right now.
Yeah. No, it's getting rough for me. I'm feeling fucking old these days with that.
Yeah, you got your driver's license 10 years ago.
Yeah, I did. And here we are now. It's absurd. But the NFL, it never ends. 2015 to now. Went over the NFL 2015 draft. We talked about the latest free agency. Where is Aaron Rodgers going? T. Higgins and Jamar Chase being signed. The NFL, we are covered here. What we've been doing the last couple of weeks is covering eras of certain teams. We talked about the process and the abysmal process that was for them. So we went through, kind of did a deep dive. We went through all of their picks, their playoff performances, how did the rebuild go? And today we're going to do a deep dive on the Oklahoma City Thunder, both how they assembled the Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden team, how they rebuilt following the departures of each of those teams, and then where they are now. We see a team that's number 1 in the West, and they've been number 1 in the West for pretty much this entire season. They already have it clinched. They're 12 and a half games ahead of the Rockets. They're pretty much cruising in, and they came in as the favorites this season. SGA is an MVP uh, finalist as well. Now, here we are now with the Thunder potentially making a quest for the NBA title. They are on an absolute roll. So, figure we'd break down the Thunder in this episode.
Yeah, and the Thunder's an interesting team because they're a storied franchise that really doesn't have a story. They have kind of a story, and the story's gonna been players wandering off to find success and accolades other places outside of Russell Westbrook. But Kevin Durant left, Ray Allen left the Supersonics. But you're a team that 58 seasons in the NBA, you've been to the playoffs 34 times. And then out of your 65 total playoff series, get this, they've won 33 and lost 32, which is a 50.8 winning percentage. Fascinating.
So they basically get bounced they basically win the first round, lose in the second ultimately. They're a second
Yeah.
round team
And
historically.
they've reached the NBA finals 4 times and they have one championship.
Hmm. I think they won in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And then I know they made it against Jordan, and then they made it against LeBron, and then I don't know where the other finals comes in, but I know that those are the big 3 with the Supersonics. It is interesting too when we think about the Thunder. Like this team was the Supersonics. You think about the Supersonics, you think about like Gary Payton and Sean Kemp, and then other than that, like the Supersonics, you have like Ray Allen for a bit there. Um, but the Supersonics and the Thunder, even though their histories are still tied, they feel like totally different entities ultimately.
Yeah, for sure. It feels like storied. It's two different cities and it's two very different cultures, especially when it comes to those cities. I mean, can you think of two more different places than Seattle and Oklahoma? I mean, at the like when it comes to like the way people there think, kind of like how people lean there. So it's like it's kind of interesting because like you kind of have the culture flipped with both these teams. And then I found their other finals appearance. Back in '87, they made the finals. They made it in
Warriors.
'96 as well, and then they made it in 2012. And then the other one would be the finals that they won.
It's like 78, I think.
Yeah, which was '78. Yeah.
Okay, so they made it against the Showtime Lakers, the '90s Bulls, and the Heatles. So they basically like all the times they've lost, they've run into historical teams of that time. The Lakers, I believe that was the Lakers' final championship, and then '96 was the infamous 72-10 Bulls, and
Yeah.
then that was the first championship for LeBron. Was 2012 against the Thunder.
Yeah, I mean, playing that Bulls team too is like anyone walking up to Mike Tyson in his prime, like, you're just gonna
You done?
die. Yeah.
Yeah, and then so it's interesting if I think about them right now, not even going through their history yet. If they've run into the Showtime Lakers, the '90s Bulls, and the Heatles, like LeBron's Heat era, if they run into, say, a team like the Celtics, who are on the quest for another title, they could be the team that the Celtics run into that ultimately could cause them to win the first back-to-back championships since the Shaq and Kobe Lakers. So they could still be in for history if they were to make the finals and lose this year.
Yeah. So yeah, they'd be the first team to win back to back since Miami did it, and then no one's done it since Golden State, I believe, right?
Oh, that's right. Golden State
With
won
Kevin
back to back.
Durant.
I'm thinking of the three-peat. Never mind.
The
So
three
yeah, they
peat,
would
yeah.
be. So the last three-peat was the Warriors in 2016, 2017. So it'd be 8 years since there was a repeat champion.
Yeah, which is interesting too, and especially going over the teams that they've run into, especially with the modern era. Just looking at the Oklahoma City Thunder, they built the team that was supposed to be the next great dynasty. We were supposed to. It felt like we were gonna get the next 10 years of the NBA was going to be Kevin Durant versus LeBron James. And then, you have a couple moves along the way that will go over, but like this was a team that was supposed to really be the successor to the San Antonio Spurs in the West. It was going to be their conference. And then Boston had like a mantle, but they only had one championship, so I don't really see that as LeBron taking the mantle. I just see that as kind of the Heat having the best team at that point. But like San Antonio and LA were definitely better franchises, but Oklahoma City was toe to toe there. Kevin Durant and LeBron, we never got to see him versus Kobe, so we are supposed to see just him and LeBron go head to head, and we never really saw just Kevin Durant and LeBron James go head to head while KD was in his prime outside of Golden State. And the first time he ran into him, he was just too young.
Yeah, 2012. I mean, those guys were babies at that point. But it is interesting seeing how they first assembled the. I don't even know what they would call that team, the Thunder team that was created. I don't know if they have a name or not, but they draft Kevin Durant in 2007 behind Greg Oden. Greg Oden was first overall. He was basically Joel Embiid before Joel Embiid. I'm kidding, of course, but injury wise, the parallels are there. They take him second overall. They get Kevin Durant, who's easily the best player in that draft. And then 2008, they draft Russell Westbrook with the fourth overall pick. Sandwiched between him was Derrick Rose at one, Michael Beasley at two, and OJ Mayo with the Timberwolves. Interesting choice. And then obviously Russell Westbrook. I think if we're looking at this draft historically, I think Russell Westbrook's probably the best player in this draft. There's like Kevin Love, who's shouted out. Brooke Lopez is in this draft. Roy Hibbard. Um, that's how those drafts shake out. And then 2009, we have James Harden taken third. Ahead of him was Blake Griffin and infamously Hashim Thabit, one of the biggest busts of all time. My
Yep.
first real miss as an NBA fan was knowing and thinking that Hashim Thabit was going to be that guy in the NBA. I was convinced that Hashim Thabit was going to be the greatest player who ever stepped foot on a basketball court, and I was wrong. He was fucking ass. He was terrible. He was the at one point he was the highest drafted G League player of all time before Anthony Bennett took his throne. That's how bad Hashim Thabit was. He was infamously bad. But you know what? When I played him in 2K, though, I would always bump his stats up to 99 because I believed.
Yeah.
But my observation with these three drafts is that all three of these players that they found was because of another team's malpractice. The Trailblazers took Greg Oden instead of Kevin Durant because Kevin Durant sucked at bench pressing. I think he could only bench press like a buck 85 um, in his pro day.
Okay. Everyone in the
And
NBA
then,
is so small right now. There's no muscle mass on anyone in the NBA. I look at players in the NBA and I feel like I could take him, you know?
yeah, this was like the Dwight Howard like this era though. This was still when big men were predominant. This is 2007. Kevin Durant's old as fuck now.
This is still when
And
men
then
were men.
yeah, when they would swallow the whistle and be men, yeah. And then 2008, the Timberwolves yet again. They do it in back-to-back drafts, but they draft OJ Mayo over Russell Westbrook. The Timberwolves with yet another malpractice. And then in 2009, it's I wouldn't call the Clippers, whatever. They took Blake Griffin. He was exciting. But Hashim Thabit, the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies, the Trailblazers, and the Timberwolves ultimately are what caused these three players to all form with the Thunder. And that's how we're caught up to date at this point.
But
All three of
you
them.
missed out on Steph Curry too, though.
That's true. That's true. I mean, if you're going to miss out on Steph Curry, though, at least you get James Harden. Like, James Harden at one point was going toe to toe with Steph Curry. Steph Curry is a better player all time. Steph Curry is probably the greatest point guard of all time. But at least you got James Harden because, like, it wasn't Ricky Rubio, it wasn't Tyreek Evans, and it wasn't Johnny Flynn. So for that, I can't roast them for it.
Yeah, you got one of them. And that's like a landmine where you kind of stepping around it. Like I was like on Google Maps. Sometimes I'll just randomly like scroll and look at different countries. I forget the name of the country, but I was looking at it and it was like a country in Africa. So I'm like, what's this country's crime statistics? Is it safe? And they're like, well, if you go outside the city, just be aware that most of the unpaved roads are full of landmines. So I was like,
Oh,
oh, okay. Like, doesn't seem that safe. So, like, that's kind of like what that lineup of guard feels like. It's like you're going out there and there's no paved roads there, and there's some landmines just kind of sitting out there left from the old wars that were going on, I guess, or they're still at war. I don't know.
I don't know. But the Timberwolves stepped on two landmines back to back picks right before Steph Curry. That's a level of pain that I don't want to feel. I feel like I'd rather step on a landmine than deal with that pain, actually. But the Thunder, they accumulate these three, eventual MVPs. 2010 comes around. They have these guys. How do they fare in 2010 ultimately after they're all here?
Yeah, so in 2010, that's the first year that they make the playoffs with this team. So you go through the process drafting Kevin Durant here. In 2007, you don't qualify. 2008, 2009, you don't qualify. But in 2010, you qualify and you lose in the first round to the Los Angeles Lakers in the first round. Lakers ended up winning the championship that year, and you ended up taking 2 games off of them. So honestly, for a team in the first round, you're going up against the Lakers team with Kobe Bean Bryant going out there winning his last championship ever, and you take 2 games off of him. That's not bad. It's not a bad playoff debut at all.
No, not at all. I can say that they did well. Took two games off of one of the greatest of all time, so not bad. 2010 draft, they drafted Eric Bledsoe, but then traded Eric Bledsoe. And then everybody else they just ended up trading. So they made a couple of minor moves going into the 2010 draft. ultimately, nothing massive, I would say. Traded away their picks. And then, yeah, I would say I think they got Colt Ultrich and a couple of other guys, but otherwise, that was about it.
Yeah, and then again, we're starting to see a pattern develop with this Oklahoma City Thunder team because 2011, Oklahoma City, they were the fourth seed. You go 55 and 27. You beat the Nuggets in the first round 4-1. I believe Melo was still there. That was right before he went to New York. And then you defeat the Grizzlies 4-3. Classic Marc Gasol, Zach Randolph, gritty, grinded out teams. 7-game battle. And then you lose to the Dallas Mavericks 4-1. But the Mavericks end up going on and winning the NBA championship, beating LeBron James. LeBron James turns into the Frozen One, has the greatest meltdown ever of any superstar in any sport. So you end up losing to Dirk. And back to back years, you lose to that team that won the NBA Finals.
Yep. So this was the 2011 draft. Ultimately, what they did was they drafted Reggie Jackson, nice role player, fared relatively well for him. And then that was ultimately it. They traded for Lazar Haywood and Byron Mullins, but that's about it. They got Kendrick Perkins that they ended up adding to this team ultimately, and that was pretty much it when it came to free agency.
And they traded what would have turned into Jeff Green for Kendrick Perkins.
Yes, I believe so.
And then when did they get Serge Ibaka? Did they draft him later?
So Serge Ibaka was in the same draft as um, Russell Westbrook. So he was already on the team at this point.
Got it. Okay. And then so yeah, 2012 they get to the finals that year. They win the first game of the finals and then at the end of the second game uh Kevin Durant gets fouled. They don't call it. Miami wins and then it's a wrap. And then, theme song of the NBA finals that year was Radioactive. So
Electric times.
electric times when Imagine Dragons was debuting. But then after that, this is kind of when it all starts to unravel because James Harden starts being like, "Hey, I want to get paid." Then Oklahoma City's like, "We have to pay all of you."
Yeah. And then they end up trading him. So the trade ends up breaking down to be James Harden, Cole Aldrich, DeQuan Cook, and Lazar Haywood for Kevin Martin, Jeremy Lamb, 2 first-round picks, and a second-round pick. That trade is awful. That is one of the worst trades of all time,
And
ultimately.
this finals right here in 2012 is why you never say they're young, they'll be back, they have more opportunities because this Thunder team, every single person was like, wow, they made it so young, they'll be back here many more times. It's not guaranteed. We don't know that for a fact. And that's why it's so special when you do see a team get back to the NBA Finals. But like, I feel like 2012 and this Thunder team so far is kind of like, at that moment, one decision can change everything. Where you have three MVPs on a team, and then suddenly the first domino falls of the entire kind of team unraveling here. It's like, okay, yeah, they're young, they still have time to do it. And then guess what? They never got back to the finals.
And they never made it back. And I think that trade was a big part because ultimately, I mean, he would sign with the Rockets for a pretty massive contract, but ultimately, like we talked about the process and how they failed because they ultimately chose Tobias Harris over Jimmy Butler. Ultimately, it felt like the Thunder picked Serge Ibaka over James Harden because they would re-sign Serge Ibaka shortly after getting rid of of James Harden. They felt like, okay, well, we have Russ, we have KD, we're just gonna re-sign Serge Ibaka, who was a fine player, but like you can't pick him over James Harden at this point. Um, and then like
In
from Roosevelt,
retrospect,
and what?
would you rather have taken Westbrook? Would you have rather? I would have rather have kept Harden over Westbrook. Do you think they would have won a finals if they chose to trade Westbrook instead?
Yeah, I mean, I love Russell Westbrook, and Russell Westbrook, like I think probably fit their culture better. But like James Harden's one of the greatest scorers of all time, and so is Kevin Durant. Especially if you kept Serge Ibaka still, you just let Russ walk. I think you probably could have a gotten more for Russell Westbrook at that time, and b like James Harden at his peak is better than Russell Westbrook easily. One of the greatest scorers of all time. He was averaging like 50-point triple doubles at one point. He was insane. He was God amongst men ultimately. So yeah, I would agree with that. And then new moves that they made in the offseason outside of trading for James Harden, they signed Hashim Thabit, the guy that we talked about as one of the biggest busts ever. And it looks like they signed Derek Fisher as well. So Derek Fisher's
Oh,
on board.
Derek Fisher. Let's go. Let's go, Derek Fisher. That's great because Derek Fisher didn't help that much because you go 60-22. You're the number one seed, feeling good after trading James Harden. You beat the Rockets in the first round 4-2, and then the Grizzlies beat you 4-1. And then Zach
Oof.
Randolph is talking about, I want a ring. This is the year where Zach Randolph is going around the media like, I want a ring. I'm going to get a ring on my fender. And then he goes out there and he gets swept by the San Antonio Spurs. This is the peak Memphis Grizzlies era where you had the Twin Towers with, Mike Conley, Zach Randolph, Tarion Prince, and then Marcus Gasol there. And
Yeah,
then they
that
get swept.
that Grizzly team was so good. I love that team. I wish they won. What did they end up making the conference finals? Whatever happened to the Grizzlies?
Yeah, so they made the conference finals that year because they beat OKC to get there 4-1. And then Zach Randolph was like, I want a ring. I'm thinking about the finals. And then the Spurs swept them.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
that was the 2013 year where Ray Allen hit the shot.
the shot. Okay. And then so they lose in the. You said they lost in the first round.
Second round. So
Second
they
round. Okay.
they go 60-22 though. So they're the number one seed. After the previous year, they finished as the second seed. Um, but since they were 47-19, that must have been the lockout period though. But they still had played like a lot fewer games. They had 19 losses and 47 wins. So definitely a better year.
Yeah. So yeah, they ultimately did not succeed there. And then in the offseason, what they did, they drafted Steven Adams. They ultimately swapped their second pick with Andre Robertson. And they also they traded for Kevin Martin as well. Um, and then yeah, ultimately they let Derek Fisher walk. Wasn't worthy for them. And then their assistant head coach goes and coaches the Pistons, Maurice Cheeks. Um, so a couple of tweaks. They get Steven Adams, which I think is a nice addition. Ironically, you would think that Steven Adams has made an All Star team because of how good he's been, but Steven Adams has never made an All Star team, surprisingly.
No. Yeah, and he's like just good enough, but he's not an NBA All-Star. So I think that's fair, to be honest. Um But in 2014, that's the year the Spurs win the finals. But they go 58-23, so they're one game worse than the year previously. That they went 60-22, and then they beat the Grizzlies 4-3 in the first round. So you go 7 games in the first round. That's pretty brutal. And then you beat the Clippers 4-2. And then Chris Paul probably got hurt when it got tough there. And then you go into the conference championship and the Spurs beat you 4-2. End up in a 6-game series where you lose to the San Antonio Spurs again. Another year, didn't end up making the playoffs. And then 2015, you just flat out missed the playoffs.
Oof. So the following season, they don't even make the playoffs. That's pathetic. Yeah, and ultimately, like their moves from there, not a whole lot. They traded away Thabo Cephalosha, um, and they got basically nothing back in return. They traded Hashim Thabit for a bag of chips, which I think was too much to ask for. And then part of the reason they missed this team is we had Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook got hurt. Russ fractured his hand, and then Kevin Durant fractured his foot. missing time, and then they were just kind of a mess from there. And then they go into 2015, if I'm not mistaken. 2015, 2016.
Yeah, 2015, 2016. That's kind of the year it all comes to an end because now you have a year where you miss the playoffs and then you've gotten to the conference championship now against the Spurs and kind of hit your head against the wall twice. And now you go up against the Dallas Mavericks, you beat them 4-1, and then you beat the San Antonio Spurs 4-2 in the second round. But then you go up against the Golden State Warriors and you make the mistake of going up 3-1. Clay Thompson has an incredible game six Clay. That's where he got the name from it. Was this game? It was game six Clay against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And then game seven at that point was a wrap. And then what happened from there? Warriors get to the finals. Steph Curry has no knees by the time they get there, carrying them to go 73-9. Draymond gets suspended, and then LeBron ends up winning the NBA championship there, and then first domino rolls. So, what happened after the Warriors lost that NBA Finals? There, did any major thing happen on? Remember where you were on 4th of July that year?
Oh, I remember. Oh yeah. So first of all, the Warriors go 73-9. The Thunder blow a 3-1 lead. The Cavs blow a 3-1 lead. LeBron wins his title with Cleveland. And then July 4th of 2016, I remember being at Planet Fitness, working out, and everyone before then was like, Kevin Durant, no way he goes to Golden State. He's interested in Boston and staying with OKC. And then it shows that he signs with Golden State, and the world is shattered. A lot of people are pissed about the move. I think a lot of people in retrospect don't care anymore that he made that move, but he leaves to go to Golden State, the team that he just blew a 3-1 lead to, joins the best team ever assembled, and basically ruins the league for 3 years with how dominant the Warriors would basically sweep everybody outside of the Rockets moving forward for the next 3 years, setting up one of the most insane periods of time in basketball. Kevin Durant becoming a villain. And by the way, I got to say, for somebody who's not a massive Kevin Durant fan, this was a great time for basketball looking back. Kevin Durant as a villain was a much better villain than LeBron as the villain, I would say. He fit it better. He didn't give a shit. He just wanted to play ball. And the Warriors were fucking amazing with Kevin Durant, must I say. That team was absurd.
Yeah, the Warriors were amazing with Kevin Durant, and the thing when people talk about the Warriors with Kevin Durant, it's like they're like, "Oh, the Warriors with Kevin Durant." I'm like, "W- what about Magic and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? And how
James
about
Worthy.
both parties and James Worthy? How about people making a go argument for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Magic Johnson? And they're on the same team. No one is making a go argument for Kevin Durant and Steph Curry. Okay? Is Steph Curry going to be the leading scorer of all time? No. Is Kevin Durant going to be the leading scorer of all time? No. Like, so you're taking like a team with Magic Johnson who's had that firepower, like Shaq and Kobe, like is Kobe Bryant's like having five titles, is that annulled? Like we know Steph Curry, it's not annulled, but the thing with Kevin Durant is people look at it now with him and they're like, the reason why they do annul it is everyone else in those situations won somewhere else, whether it was Kareem with the Bucks, whether it was Steph Curry, whether it was Shaq, whether it was Kobe after Shaq, being the best player on his team when Shaquille O'Neal was winning Finals MVP, whether it was LeBron who went other places when he had Dwayne Wade and Kyrie Irving. It's like all those players won somewhere else, and it's like with Kevin Durant, it's like it seems like this Oklahoma City Thunder team's kind of like throughout its history is kind of this home for troubled stars who never could really quite do it. Like kind of that with Clyde Drexler too, where he kept running into Jordan.
Yeah, essentially, it's interesting because if we're gonna look like this time is a good time to kind of reflect on Kevin Durant's legacy, especially he has this time with the Warriors, which we'll talk about what the Warriors do later on. But Kevin Durant leaves the Thunder in a situation where I feel like they were the team that gave the Warriors the most threat. He essentially eliminates the Warriors' biggest threat, joins the Warriors, makes them great. But ultimately, he gets 2 rings, which when he retires, he can say that he's a champion, which I think is fine. But as far as the Thunder, like completely kills the Thunder from there. They're they're basically just relying on Russ at this point, a guy who they of all 3 of those players probably should have moved off of first, but nonetheless, Kevin Durant breaks up with them, goes to the Warriors. What happens next?
Yeah, he breaks up and goes to the Warriors, and then following that year, that's the year Russell Westbrook goes nuclear, averages a triple double, wins an MVP just for taking them to the playoffs. They end up finishing as the 6th seed. They lose 4-1 to the Rockets.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then ultimately, what comes from that later on is they trade away Serge Ibaka. He goes to the Magic. They get Victor Oladipo, Ilyasova, and Domantas Sabonis. So they get someone to build around with Russ, and then they
That's a
also get Victor
haul,
Oladipo.
actually. Looking
They got
back
a
on
great
that,
haul for Serge Ibaka. Looking back, the fact they got one really good role player and then 2 really good star players at one point. Domantas
yeah.
Sabonis and Victor Oladipo for Serge Ibaka. They won that trade. They did good
Ursa
there, actually.
Ilyasova was kind of nice too.
Yeah, he was a solid role player. And then free agency comes around. I'm trying to see if they signed anybody big. It doesn't say anything here.
They
Um,
were all on the Magic too.
yeah,
Sabonis was there. Damn.
Sabonis was drafted by the Magic, but he never played for them. And
Okay,
then
and
Victor
then
Oladipo.
then they traded Sabonis to the Pacers. Interesting, because in 2018, the year after that, um, they get the 4 seed, and then they lose to Utah. That was Donovan Mitchell's rookie season. And then also, I don't think Paul George was on that team. I think that was Victor Oladipo.
Yep, that was the Victor Oladipo era. That
Yeah,
time, they also signed Russ to a 5-year, $205 million deal. And then I see here, it does look like later on, like in the offseason, they do trade for Paul George ultimately.
okay,
Um,
because I think he was on the. Was he on the team when they lost in the finals, or is it the next season?
for the Thunder.
Yeah, for Paul George.
So after the 2017-2018 season, they trade Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis to the Pacers for Paul George.
Got it.
And Paul
Okay.
George then signs.
That makes sense. And then yeah, after that, um in 2019, they get to the playoffs as the 6th seed, but they lose to Portland 4-1. Damian Lillard hits the shot over them.
A shot that essentially I think kills the last iteration of the Thunder because shortly after that, Paul George demands a trade. He re-signs. They get Enos Cantor. Um, they bring in Carmelo Anthony. Um, they have Dennis Schroeder there for a while, and then Paul George ultimately he re-signs, but then eventually gets traded to the Clippers, which we'll go over in a second.
Yeah. Imagine you're Dennis Schroeder. You're from Germany, and then suddenly you're living in Oklahoma.
Oof, that's a culture shock to say the least.
All right.
So,
I mean, yeah, that's a pretty good like I mean, I feel like some of the trades they've done and like part of why they are here where they are, it's like they've done a good job at like staying relevant and being competitive. They just kind of haven't quite figured out the championship formula yet so far with this team.
yeah, absolutely. So now this is the year that they trade. The 2019-2020 season is the year that Kawhi Leonard signs with the Clippers, and then Paul George requests to sign with the Clippers. They trade Paul George 1 year after signing an extension in exchange for SGA, Danilo Gallinari, and then 5 first-round picks. Ultimately, this is when the draft picks become interesting again. Um, we'll talk about who they get and where in a minute, but yeah, the Paul George era is over very quickly in OKC.
Yeah, and then also reflecting on it for the Clippers, what duo makes more sense right now? Kawhi Leonard and Kawhi Leonard and SGA. Because
Oof.
right now it's Kawhi Leonard and then or it could have been Kawhi Leonard and SGA, and you could have kept all of your 5 first round picks. Like if you let SGA develop a couple more years, like not everyone is dunking on LeBron their first season. Like SGA was traded around a couple of years, but he's developed into one of the best players in the NBA as far as like technical skill, drawing fouls. He's kind of another James Harden figure in the NBA right now, or Russell Westbrook just dominating at point guard here. So if you had that paired with Kawhi Leonard, I feel like that would have been a really good duo there. So like Oklahoma City at that point, like you may have that lifeline and the end of it, you're like, you know what? You're staring at an extension. Russell Westbrook, kind of the drama in the media building around him. You get a chance to just hit reset real quick. I feel like that was one of those kind of unintentional lifelines for Oklahoma City where the stupidity of the Clippers actually saved them. Because sometimes
Yeah.
you need someone to just be dumber than you to have a chance.
Yeah, I mean, plenty of teams were dumber than them. The fact that they even landed all 3 of the stars that we just talked about. I think the thing when I think about the Paul George trade was it was easily. I think this was more shameful than the Kevin Durant thing in the sense that he had just signed a 5-year deal with the Thunder, and then immediately demands a trade to play for the Clippers with Kawhi Leonard. Like that was when I felt player empowerment had reached its rock bottom, and then Paul George has since kind of crumbled. But yeah, but they get 5 first-round picks and SGA, which is obviously where they are sitting now. And then shortly after they trade Paul George, they then trade Russell Westbrook to the Rockets for Chris Paul, and then what would end up being 4 first-round picks with a few pick swaps in there as well.
Nine?
Te- They
Nine
got
first round picks?
Yeah, so they got rights to pick swaps in 2021, 2024, 2025, and then a 2026 first round pick. So they're still getting picks from the Russell Westbrook trade, and this trade happened in 2020.
That's crazy. That's like between Paul George and Russell Westbrook, you get 5 picks.
Yeah, it was absurd the fact that this happened. And then they also, this free agency, this isn't a crazy signing by any means, but they signed Lou Dort. So now we
Hell
got
yeah. No, that's a great signing for them. Lou Dort is a character blue collar player on their team. He's important for them. But yeah, I feel like too with Russ and Paul George, they traded them exactly at the point in their career where they started to decline, where they had maybe 2 or 3 really good years left in their prime, and then they would start to kind of fall off from there. So Oklahoma City, like that trade with the Clippers really I feel like saved them. So it's kind of like you're dumber than I am, so kind of just help me out here. And then we see like this with the Mavericks here, and then so you made the playoffs with Chris Paul and SGA. You pushed the Thunder with Russell Westbrook and James Harden to 7 games. That's in the bubble that year, I believe, and you end up losing.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, their season got shortened, um, and then they don't make the playoffs in the off season. Obviously, there's this virus going around. There's this little common cold, um, which sidelines them. And then after the COVID year and everything that occurred there, they decide to trade Chris Paul. And then where do they end up getting for Chris Paul? So Chris Paul, they trade him to the Suns for Ty Jerome, Jalen LaCoy, Kelly Oubre, Ricky Rubio, and a 2022 first round pick. So now we're at 10 first round picks now, which they've
Random
acquired.
ass players.
Yeah. And then their draft, they end up drafting Josh Giddey, Trey Mann, and then they drafted Alphonse again, but they ended up trading him to the Rockets. But ultimately,
No. That guy's a stud.
he is a stud. And then they trade Steven Adams for George Hill to Milwaukee. Some of the notable trades there.
Yeah, I don't know about that trade, trading Steven Adam for George Hill, but yeah, trading Sengun for to the Rockets is definitely a mistake there because if you had him on their team right now, you wouldn't necessarily need Chet, but you would have three superstars on your team, and then you also have Jalen Williams there, who's an all-star there. So I feel like that's a move that maybe could have hurt you, but you're still doing really good, and the NBA draft is tough.
Yeah, and it's hard to pick in those situations. They end up trading him for 2 first-round picks. The Thunder get more picks. I feel like Sam Presti and Danny Ainge have a lot in common, to be honest, ultimately. So after they do all that, what happens from there?
Yeah, so after they do all of that, they end up missing the playoffs again. 2021 playoffs they don't make. They go 22 and 50. They also miss the playoffs in 2022. They go 24 and 58 and then finish 14th in the West both years.
Yep. And then from there, they get the Josh Giddey pick. And then in 2022, they draft Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, Peyton Watson, who was ended up dealt, and then Jalen Williams as well. But they get Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams, 2 guys that are fundamental currently in their drafts at this point.
Yeah, and Chet Holmgren got injured initially, but he played for them in the playoffs last year, and he's someone who should be a star. He's a Kristaps Porzingis type, so even if he is just what Porzingis still really was good when he first came into the NBA. So if he's that type of player, that's still a really solid pickup for you. And then Jalen Williams as a guard has been a great number 2 scorer to complement SGA there. So both of those players, a huge pickup for you. So I feel like that's where you really start to hit on your draft, where when you get 1 star, but when you're able to get two, and you get SGA from trading Paul George, and you're able to get two now of your big three in the same draft. I mean, that's a pretty good swing by the Thunder.
I would say so, of course. And then following that, I mean, they made a couple of small deals, but ultimately, you said, Chet Holmgren got banged up, didn't end up playing the following season. Um, what comes after this rebuild here?
Yeah, so 2023, you go 40 and 42, and you don't end up making the playoffs.
Okay. And then moving into this upcoming year, they end up taking, they actually don't keep their picks. They drafted Derek Lively, but they traded him to Dallas. And then they drafted Hunter Tyson. He left. Ultimately, nothing super eventful here. Um, it's not showing exactly what that compensation was for Derek Lively, but he was a part of the trade that ultimately moved him to Dallas. Ultimately,
Yeah, move him to Dallas, and then he plays a part in beating you the following year because 2024, you beat the Pelicans in the first round 4-0, and the first couple games were kind of close, to be honest, where I felt like until Brandon Ingram came back in the game, the Pelicans had a real chance of beating the Thunder. But, you have to put your stars back into the game, and he ended up shooting them out of it. But you beat them 4-0, and then you give Dallas the toughest run for their money in the West of any other team. And I know Anthony Edwards beat the Nuggets last year. However, he got pretty much a gentleman's sweep against the Mavericks, where the series you had, it felt like a 6-game war versus Dallas, where it felt like they beat the Timberwolves with ease. And I know matchups make everything, but that matchup kind of made them in the pecking order, put them above Minnesota. And then that conversation where it's really now them probably the Lakers, Warriors, and Nuggets as the top 4 teams. So you really kind of earn a lot of respect in that one, where you kind of prove it against Dallas. And Dallas ended up making the finals, so no shame losing that.
No, no shame at all. And then now we look at them both set up for this season moving forward. They're 57 and 12. They have a 12 game lead over the Rockets. And then if we look at their picks, like we mentioned that they got basically 9 picks from Paul George and Russell Westbrook. This upcoming draft, they have not one, not two, not three, not four, 5 first round picks this upcoming draft.
No way.
Yes, they have 5, but it gets better. 2026, they have not one, not two, 3 first round picks. And then in 2027, you guessed it, not one, not two, 3 first round picks. 2028, they have multiple picks. 2029, they have multiple picks. They will not have a draft without multiple first round picks until 2030. And then there's a bunch of second round picks, but who gives a fuck about that piece there? But 5 first round picks this draft. What are they going to do? Like, they can't keep all those picks. They have to trade those, obviously.
Yeah, no. Playing, I bet like playing Uno with Sam Presti and Danny Ainge is like, for some reason, they always end up with all the draw 4 cards and you don't know how. And they never use
Yeah.
them though for anything.
Yeah. No, seriously. That's
Why
fucking.
would I put it down? I might need it for later.
Yeah. They care. I think that's the problem with Sam Presti and Danny Ainge. They're both good GMs with rebuilding, but I feel like as soon as your team is really good, fire them and hire your head coach. That's what you got to do because it worked for the Celtics. As soon as the Celtics added Brad Stevens, I feel like everything clicked. But like, what? You don't even need 5 first round picks. Your team is already loaded. Like, what can you possibly do to get better at this point? And then you have 3 first round picks basically until 2029 every single year. They have 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. So they have 13 first round picks the next 3 years. I feel like that's not even a good thing. That's like too much. They have too many first round picks.
Yeah, what are you gonna do with all that?
Like, we went through all the drafts. Like, if we look at just pick a random draft, having 5 first round picks, like, the drafts aren't that good. I mean, the top 10 picks the year that Harden was drafted, we still had the Ricky Rubios and the Johnny Flynn's and the Jordan Hills. Like, the first round is not that, unless if you're picking in the top 10, you're not going to get yourself a superstar more often than not. Chances are you're going to get like a role player like a Jeff Teague or Jamal Crawford. You're going to get one of those, if anything.
Yeah. No, it's like essentially it's like an options contract. Yeah, right? So it's like you have like the right to pick something somewhere, but sometimes it ends up expiring worthless or you just don't do anything with it or the player is bad. Like it's kind of that. And sometimes if you have too much of it, then you can't really focus on what to do with it. But they're just going to be trading these first round picks every single year for like role players and just kind of build their role players year in and year out because at some point they're gonna need to make a decision when Chet and Jalen Williams need to get paid, and some of the other young players on their team need to get paid.
I feel like history could repeat themselves. I don't think SGA is going anywhere. I feel like he's their new Westbrook, but you have a chance where you have to pay Chet, you have to pay Jalen Williams, and then other players in those deals are getting older as well. So it's like, I feel like there's a scenario in place where we're going to have essentially what happened with Harden and Westbrook and Kevin Durant. It's going to be the same type of breakup. I don't know if they're all going to win MVPs, but in the sense that I think that all of these guys are eventually going to have to break up and they're going to have to retool. Will they do it successfully? We'll find out.
Yeah, and we'll see how successful this team is because they still do need to prove it for me. Because a lot of people are, we've gone through this rebuild now, anointing them this team that's going to get to the NBA Finals and win it. It's kind of throwing Jokic, and then we forgot about Anthony Edwards now. And then Luca and LeBron mean nothing. Steph Curry, like Jimmy Butler, that means nothing. Like the Thunder are kind of a lock for the NBA Finals. So it's like you still were what 9 wins away from the NBA Finals last year. Like 9 wins in the NBA playoffs was really hard to do and a lot. And then SGA is a really good player. He's in the conversation for MVP this year with Giannis, Jokic, and then Tatum, whose numbers isn't as good as the other three there, but his team is playing really well this year. So he's kind of in the conversation there. But at the same time, it's like this team still does need to accomplish more to prove that, okay, this by and far was more successful, but you can count it as a success because you lost all of your major stars. And typically, when that happens to a team in the NBA, they take sometimes decades to recover. I mean, you look at the Pistons, you look at the Magic, you look at the Trailblazers, some of these teams you just take forever, or sometimes they never recover with teams like the Hornets here. So it's like, for honestly, for them, it's like the fact that you're able to stay relevant and build a young and exciting team. For Oklahoma City, it's like it's not that much going on in Oklahoma City. So the fact that you have an NBA team there that's competitive to win the NBA finals, like this is the most important thing going on in that city to sports fans when the Sooners aren't playing.
Yeah, I think the fact that you were able to get Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden all on the same team, it didn't work out the way you wanted to. You guys didn't win a championship, but the way you retooled, and now that you have fucking 13 first round picks for the next 3 years, like they've done a great job ascending and building their new team. And now I think the Thunder are in a position where I think they very well could win a title within the next 5 years. It's just ultimately who can they put in front of SGA and put with SGA. Maybe they get aggressive and they move off of Chet Holmgren and maybe they go after somebody like a Giannis if he doesn't want to stay in Milwaukee, getting him a big man. But ultimately, I think they should make a big move. Ultimately, all those picks, like you'd be foolish to keep all of them at this point.
Yeah, and I could see them making a big move. So we'll see what goes on. But with the Oklahoma City Thunder, just with the franchise as a whole, I feel like you can sum this team up as just a team who got lucky with Paul George and Russell Westbrook getting traded at their peak in that rebuild. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's really the inflection point. Just looking at that team, like the major points is like when Harden gets traded, losing 3-1 to the Warriors, and then as soon as Paul George decided he wanted to be traded, it seemed like a disaster for the Thunder, but it ended up working out for them better than anyone else than Kevin Durant. But if the Thunder go out there and win a championship without Kevin Durant, I don't think they will. But if they do, it's like then it's same amount of success for pretty much every party gone around. Harden got paid a ton of money. Westbrook got an MVP. They never got their titles for Harden and Westbrook, but it's like it kind of worked out for everybody. And then your franchise has pretty much been relevant over 50% of its years. You win over 50% of your playoff series. Like I feel like this is a very underrated franchise where maybe they're not NBA royalty, but if they can win a couple titles, you're kind of looking at it with how good they've been consistently.
Yeah, I feel like I don't think they have the same pedigree as the Steelers, but I feel like they're similar in the sense that they've consistently made successful playoff runs. They haven't really had too much noise in the postseason of late. However, they've always been there. They've been consistent. They had a period of time where they made, I think, 14 consecutive playoff appearances for between Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, and then even after the rebuild as well. So they've been successful. They've been consistent. You can also compare them to a team like maybe like uh, there's examples in the past. You know, the Yankees
The
have been
Bills
consistent in baseball. The Bills have been consistent. Um,
not winning titles too. Well, they won
yeah,
one title. The Bills haven't won a title, but the Philadelphia Eagles too, kind of they won a couple titles.
yeah. The Eagles have been successful, and then the Niners. You could say the Niners as well. Um, have been perennial playoff teams. So I think they're due, but I just don't know. at this point, when we look in the West, they are probably the favorites in the West, but we look at the Celtics. Can they beat the Celtics? I think the Lakers series would be fun. I do think the Thunder probably beat them, but you still have the Nuggets to face. The Warriors, they have a lot of experience, so nothing's guaranteed in the NBA. We know that, so we'll see what happens with the Thunder. But the rebuild has been very successful.
Yeah, yeah. For me, honestly, like I think they can and they have a good shot of making the finals, but my gut is telling me the Lakers might make the finals this year. Like with how they've been playing recently, like I think the Lakers aren't the best team in the West, but the way Luka's been playing over the last few weeks, and Luka and LeBron are the type of players that like you just give them some help and they can take you so far. And are we gonna say it's tough to say like this year is like is Kyrie Irving's impact at this point in his career still bigger than LeBron James? I don't know. I still feel like LeBron James affects the game, I guess, in more of a magnitude than Kyrie Irving does with how he can control it, just his IQ. He's another coach on the floor. Mentally, he's a consistent backup to Luca there. And he can also consistently get to the rim, and he's not going to be scared, and he's not going to have a situation like Kyrie did versus Boston, where Kyrie Irving was a liability anytime they played outside of Dallas against the Celtics.
Yeah, I agree. I think LeBron, ultimately, the way he impacts the game, I still think he's going to be motivating people. I think they're the Lakers bench is not bad either. You have Austin Reeves as your third, and he's been effective for you as well. You still have the Roy Hachimura's of the world. Dalton Necht has been decent for you as well. So I do think that the Lakers can give them trouble, and especially with how good their defense has been since um, the trade as well. Then I think the Lakers can give them trouble, and I would actually kind of root for a Celtics Lakers finals ultimately.
Yeah, and I don't think like Denver's an easy task either. I still think Denver probably beats Oklahoma City at this point. Like Chet is not going to guard Jokic. Neither is Hartenstein. Sorry, not going to happen. And I think Jokic is quietly having the best year of his career. And recently, Jamal Murray has been playing really well. And then they just had a game versus the Warriors where Jamal Murray and Jokic were out, and then Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter went off and beat the Warriors with Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry.
Yeah, the Nuggets. It'd be a shame to not see Jokic win MVP this year with how great he's been. He's averaging basically a triple double, and without him on the floor, they are genuinely one of the worst teams in the NFL and the NBA. It'd be a shame for him not to win.
And his 3-point percentage is historic, too.
42%. Yeah, I'm sorry, he is averaging a triple double. He's literally averaging a triple double right now. 30,
Yeah.
12, and 10 right now.
Yeah, him. I think Giannis is averaging like a double double, but he's only averaging like 4 assists.
Yeah. His win shares are through the roof. Yeah. This would be a tragedy. He's led the league in efficiency now for 5 consecutive years. Yeah, they should give him the MVP. This would be foolish not to. I
Yeah.
don't want it to fall into a scenario where I feel like in the 2010s they didn't want to give it to LeBron. Like LeBron was probably the best player every year and probably could have won the MVP every year, but they gave it to somebody who basically had a better story. Russell Westbrook, he averaged a triple double. That's a fun story. James Harden got second place too many times. James Harden gets an MVP. I just don't want that to happen to Jokic. He's got 3 MVPs. They didn't want to give him 3 consecutive MVPs. I hope in this case they still give him one because I still think he is an all-time great, and a 4-time MVP is fitting for him.
Yeah, 4-time MVP is fitting, but we'll see. Should be an interesting NBA playoffs and MVP race. But this week, your last name is Jameson. You have a Jameson flag in your room. We have what did you do this week? On not only on top of what have you been listening to, what have you been watching, but we've had some pretty solid St. Patrick just stays crawls. Nothing too crazy. Definitely some fun ones though. But how was your St. Patrick's Day? How was St. Patrick's Day in the Southwest in Phoenix compared to New England?
Yeah, so honestly, New England does it better than Phoenix. Phoenix doesn't know anything about St. Patty's Day. But um, I matched with a girl on Monday, which was St. Patty's Day. We start talking, and then a few hours later, we're grabbing drinks at a English pub in downtown Phoenix. Didn't really talk much before, but basically, my plans that I had with a buddy fell through. So ultimately, we're like, all right, my last name's Jameson. You're not going to have a better person to hang out with on St. Patty's Day. So we go there, and then place is called George and the Dragon in downtown Phoenix. It's an English pub,
Wrong
which is
island.
close enough to Ireland, I guess. So we go
Wrong
in,
island.
we go in there, it's slammed, and then we go to buy a drink, and there's this guy in front of us that's cocked off of his ass. He's like, he sees me. I have a green shirt on, and then I have a Red Sox hat because Boston, Irish. It's closer to Ireland than we are. And he's like, "Oh, you're from Boston? That's awesome." And then he buys a drink for both me and the girl that I go with. I'm like, "Okay, cool."
Oh yeah.
So basically, it was a first date, but they bought my drink, which was great. So
Did you
then,
let him watch?
yeah, he probably would have been down to watch. And then we go to a couple other bars. We end up ending the night at none other than Monkey Pants, the best bar in Phoenix. And we see a couple of drunk people sing karaoke, and wasn't super eventful. We didn't end up hooking up or anything, but yeah, it was the first date on St. Patty's Day, and we'll see where that goes.
Nah, he's being modest. He definitely hooked up with her. He just wanna lie
I
for the
don't kiss.
camera. He's being too
Uh,
modest and humble.
I don't kiss and tell.
Yeah.
What did you do for St. Patty's Day?
We went up to the domain and they like blocked off a section of the road between like Dogwood and Jack and Ginger. So we went there. I liked it because they made you like pay $10 to get in. So it kind of like filtered people out by price. I guess, you kind of like separate the classes there. So we went there, got some green Guinness there, got some barbecue. Had a good time. We found a place with unlimited skee ball that was free, and then they had a live band. They had some live cover bands there, so they had a bagpipe band there. Then they had this like British cover band again, like the band was super British, like again, wrong island. But yeah, it was a good time. Got in 3 hours, hung out, weeknight, got out, got back in
Yeah,
time, watched some beat Bobby play. You know,
there you go. Yeah, kind of uneventfully eventful. It sucks when St. Patty's Day is on a Monday. If it's on a Friday, it would have been legendary, but it's a Monday. We still got to work for now. So, oh well, it was a good time.
yeah, it's good to get
It,
out on a weeknight though, especially when there's like so many rooftop places and then also the weather being like 70, 80 degrees all week. Like the past 2 weeks, it's pretty much stayed above 70 during the day.
yeah, yeah, it's starting to warm up here. It's gonna be 80 this week, so it's nice. We're starting to get the spring weather that we've been waiting for.
You're going to get
Um,
cooked for the first time in the summer.
that'll be fun. Yeah, I'm not excited for 110, but I'm excited for 80 and 90 because I know I have a lot of friends that have like pool parties. So hopefully it's not too bad here. But when it's 115 here, I'll be fucking squealing. Can already tell. Um, as far as for what we've been watching, I haven't watched too much, but I did watch this cartoon called Fritz the Cat. Um, initially, apparently, this is like a super influential cartoon. Ultimately, it's the first and only cartoon that was X-rated, and it was
What?
supposedly it inspired Family Guy and Simpsons and like South Park, like all of those cartoons. And it's just like basically about like this counterculture cat that joins this like hippie um like cult almost basically so that he could join an orgy and have sex with women.
The cat want like, and is this like kind of like BoJack Horseman?
No, think of it. It's made in the early '70s, so it's all about like counterculture and that type of shit. Um, but yeah,
Okay,
it's
so
basically
like
just like
against Nixon.
yeah, it's against Nixon, and ultimately it's essentially just like it's the first like adult cartoon movie, basically. like one of the first ones that's like geared towards like the adult audience, and it's just like I don't know. There's just a lot of like they make fun of like the free love movement. They make fun of like sex and like um I don't know. It's I didn't finish it because frankly I just tapped out. You got the I got the gist of the movie, but I would recommend it if you like X-rated cats having an orgy. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, sounds interesting. So we have over
It got
the
banned
past
too
few
for a
weeks.
while.
Yeah, we got the weekend. We got Playboy Cardi. We got cat orgies. We got nuclear holocaust here.
Yeah,
You never know what's you never know what's gonna come on the Brickyards. What have I been watching or listening to this week segment?
yeah. I would say yeah. Honestly, it's yeah. I wouldn't. Yeah, it's interesting. It's on Amazon, so there you go. You can check it out.
Yeah, you know, I watched a movie last night and I didn't. I ended up falling asleep, but like, when you're like something a lot and then they're gonna make it into a franchise and then it just makes you mad, like Star Wars level, like the new movies or the prequels, like it was on HBO Max. Is like, oh, that'll be a good movie to fall asleep to. The amount of potential the Assassin's Creed movie had, you had the actor, you had some sequences in that movie that replicate the style of the game and how it's supposed to look, but you know what we're gonna do? Take the worst part of the game and then make that 85% of the movie where we're gonna tell the entire story through the animus and not even talk when we're back in time. Like there's not even like a story back in time. People play these games for the most part, unless you're like a super nerd dork, like actually, I think the Animus is a cool part of the lore. Like, no, people play the game to go back in time and kill people, and they're like, you know what we should do? Stay in the present for most of the movie, and then we're also gonna make the driver of the plot the present day instead of the past, where the game, the driver of the plot is the past, and then you go back into the present day. And that's what interrupts it, where anytime something cool happens, jump cut to the animus, and then it's just super choppy and grainy. And then it's supposed to be taking place in Spain, but it looks like you're in fucking Persia or the United Arab Emirates. I mean, this movie had so much potential to be good, and with the source material you had, it was pretty easy to make this movie good, and you had a good actor in Michael Fassbender.
Yeah, always wanted to see this, but anytime I see a video game movie, I'm always nervous because of shit like this. Like, will they ever actually give it justice? And it sounds like I know that this movie kind of bombed when it came out, but it was one of those. I feel like it was one of those franchises that if they tried it again correctly, it could be a successful franchise that would actually be fun to watch. They could make it like somewhat of like a John Wick, and to some extent, um, or even like a Hitman. They could have made it like a Hitman ultimately, but
It
instead they fail.
Yeah, it lends itself to a TV show where you could do a different time period each season, like American Horror
Hmm.
Story. So it's an easy
Yeah,
way to drive the plot, recast it so we don't have to pay like worry about these actors' schedules. You just have different actors each season because it's a different like story, but it's still Assassin's Creed, but that's how you kind of make it make sense.
yeah. I think that would work well. It's a shame that didn't work because I mean, the Assassin's Creed games, like whether it's Black Flag, whether it's Assassin's Creed 3, the original Assassin's Creed, like the game franchise is still very much prominent and still very good. Apparently, they have a new game coming out soon. I
Samurai
think
one,
it's
yeah.
yeah, I think it's Shadows, but yeah, with how relevant Assassin's Creed still is, like it's a shame that they can't get it right with a franchise like that.
Yeah, and it's tough. And Assassin's Creed has kind of been one of those clunky franchises, but you have a lot of loyal fans. And then also, like, one of my pet peeves is I get wanting to make a PG-13 movie so it appeals to a broader audience. But we've seen with things like Logan and Deadpool, if you make it rated R and the fans of the source material are used to a rated R material, like Assassin's Creed is a rated M game. It should be a R rated movie. Why are we dumbing it down?
Yeah, that's a good point. They made it PG-13 for this movie.
Yeah, it's PG-13, and then also in this game, like with the animus, so it's essentially starts in the plot where Michael Fassbender's character is the lead assassin, and they're like hitting him with the lethal injection.
Hmm.
And so they kill him, and then the assassins like bring him back to life, and they're like, they don't even tell him what's going on when they bring him back to life. They just take him and immediately put him in the animus without telling him what it is or what's going on. So imagine you think you're dead, suddenly you're alive again, and then someone puts you back in time and suddenly you're an assassin, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, you're alive now, by the way," and then your DNA hooks up to this assassin. So it's like the way
Weird.
they tell the plot is like very weird.
That's cursed. You know what we got to do is we got to have a scenario where you watch a cartoon, you watch like a video game adaptation, and I watch a video game adaptation, and we talk about it one weekend. Maybe like the OG Mortal Kombat and the OG Mario. I do want to see the OG Mario, but just
Yeah.
doing something like that like I feel like video games just it's hard to mimic on the big screen. Even though the fact that it would you would think it would be the easiest, especially with how games are these days. Like
Yeah.
Red Dead Redemption would be so easy. GTA
You
would
know
be
one
so
that
easy to make.
wasn't bad was, it's not a good movie, but I think it's an enjoyable movie and I've rewatched it a couple times, is the Warcraft movie.
Oh, okay. For like World of Warcraft.
Yeah, I think it's like a discount Lord of the Rings. It's a solid B-rate movie, but if you just want like a fun action movie to turn on, like I feel like it's a fun movie. I've watched it 3 times and each time I've watched it, I've never been bored and I think there's some cool scenes and sequences there.
Yeah, I know that this is another one that like nobody like. It seemed like it got review bombed a little bit, but um, it still became like I think it still made like over $1 billion or something like that. Um, I never saw it, but I never played Warcraft either. You know what's a
Yeah.
video game movie that I actually enjoyed was Mario. Like the updated Mario. They did good. They made it they made it Mario esque. And that's all I could ask
On
for.
Honestly, weirdly the Sonic movies too.
Yeah. Which almost was my last movie in theaters ever before
If
COVID. I was
society ended with COVID, yeah.
yeah, society ended with us ordering Chipotle to a movie theater in Boston to watch Sonic drunk. That's what we did. One of our friends DoorDash Chipotle because Chipotle was across the street from the AMC we went to, and they dead ass delivered the Chipotle. The DoorDash driver delivered it to our seats in the
In the
rest.
theater.
Yeah, so we just had Chipotle, eating
That's sick.
Sonic and watching
What a
Sonic.
G. That's a top
Yeah,
tier driver though.
yeah, no, it was awesome. This was like right when DoorDash came up too, so it was kind of like lesser known. But yeah, that was iconic. And then
That's
one of our
another
friends
like
walked out of the movie, which was embarrassing. But
that's another argument too. It's like if you're staying in a hotel and the elevator isn't a key card locked elevator, so you don't need your key card to pick which floor you're going to, should your DoorDash driver bring it to your room for you, or should you have to meet them in the lobby? If you're like paying for DoorDash, because you're paying all this money for delivery fees. I have to tip the driver. I'm already paying like 10, 15 extra dollars than I normally would. Should I have to go down and get it and be a decent human, or should the expectation be you bring the food all the way to me?
well, as a customer, bring it to my door. Open the door for me if you actually. You know what? I'll keep the door unlocked. You can open the door and bring it right to my lap, so I don't even have to get up. I'll throw you an extra dollar. As far as I'm concerned, you are an employee, just like you have to do dumb shit as a sacker, or if you work in finance or whatever. If you are an employee, you got to put up with some bullshit. If somebody orders something to a hotel, you also have the choice to not accept that. You can decline it. I would say if you accept it, you are giving yourself the ability to go up to their room, knock on the door, and drop off the food and get the fuck out of there. As far as I'm concerned, I think that is the expectation you have. You know what you're getting yourself into if it's going through the fucking Marriott.
Yeah, it's also like the instructions on the delivery isn't like if they're delivering it to your apartment, it's not like, "Oh, leave it at my gate and I'll walk there to get it."
That's not how DoorDash works, dude. Like, fucking put it to my door. If I don't have it directly to my door, they're gonna get review bombed. I don't care. We live in 2025. They're gonna get a 1 star. That's gonna kill their rating. They're gonna be bummed. It's gonna hurt their paycheck. I'm kind of heartless with DoorDash. Deliver it to my
I like
fucking door.
I like too, like it was when we were in Dallas for Jack K's, and after the concert we walked back and I ordered Whataburger, and this kind of ruined Whataburger because I ate it cold. And if you eat a food burger lukewarm after it's been sitting in a car for an hour, ugh, one of the
Disgusting.
worst tastes or feelings you could ever have. So you order this burger, and then not only does it take the person over an hour, they like go on the map and they pass the hotel. They go like 20 minutes down the road and loop back around, like, in no idea what they're doing. And then they're like a half hour past the latest estimated arrival time. And then they're like, you need to come down into the lobby so I can deliver your food. And I'm just like, just leave it at the desk. Like, I'll bring it down. But like, there's no lock on the elevator. And then it's just like cold Whataburger. So like, kind of like ruined Whataburger too a little bit.
Ugh. Yeah, that sucks. Yeah, cold burgers, cold fast food is rancid. And also, sounds like that guy was a fucking idiot, to be honest. Whoever did that, like, just fucked it up delivering it. Also, I had White Castle recently for the first
Was it
time.
good?
No, it's not. It's fucking disgusting, actually. But it was free. We had a free deal with T-Mobile. You get 4 free sliders. So me and Andrew split it. The two burgers, they like they when you see them cook, you can see them cooking it, and it looks like they're cooking spam. Basically, you know what spam is? It looks like they're
Yeah.
cooking spam, but throughout the entire process, they're cooking it with onions. You see like onions over like what looks like spam, and then when they're done with that part, they cover it in onions, and then they put it on a burger which is soaked in onions. They soak it in onions the whole way through. As a guy who doesn't like onions, you can imagine how I thought about the burger. I don't like
Not
onions.
not good. A lot of onions.
Not good.
I
Too many
saw them making
onions.
the burger.
I said, "Wow, that's a lot of onions."
Too many onions, some say. I don't
So many
know.
onions, very acidic.
Maybe.
Did not like it. Very crunchy. Yeah, no. It's on White Cat like the thing is with White Castle is you eat it and then you immediately feel gross and you're still hungry. So you spent like $3 on 2 sliders and well, we in this case didn't spend anything, but if I spent money on this, I'd be more disappointed. You eat
Yeah.
the food and then you're still hungry for food. Like it doesn't you're basically just eating air, it feels like, but you're eating a burger that just sucks basically. It's better for I'd imagine it's better frozen. Like it's a frozen burger that you just went out to get, which is worse. At least with a fast food burger, it's like they cook it kind of, but this one they just like heat it up what looks to be spam and the burger is yeah, the burger's just gross. It's just not good. Don't ever get white. It's just yeah, it's disgusting. The only reason why White Castle exists is for racists and stoners.
Yeah.
That is why White Castle exists. It's because of Harold and Kumar and racists. I don't know where the racists
Yeah.
come in, but I'm sure they fit in somewhere.
Probably, yeah. No, definitely somewhere. Yeah. I mean, for me, like I tried a fast food restaurant recently that I hadn't had before, which was Shake Shack. Have you had that before?
Yeah, I had it in Vegas the first time I went to Vegas.
Honestly, not bad. Like, I got their chicken there, and the chicken nuggets there were actually like, I think they're better than Chick-fil-A and Popeyes, to be honest. Like, as far as
Yeah.
like just like the chicken nuggets and like the shakes are pretty good. I get the truffle burger. Honestly, as far as like a fast food chain, like it was pretty nice inside. It was well designed. Like both of the locations that they have in Austin, like one of them has a view of the city and one of them's just like a souped up location, like in the domains. Like honestly, Shake Shack is like pretty underrated. It's one of those restaurants that flies under the radar, but honestly, I think they're kind of like better than most of the competition out there.
Yeah. I had it in Vegas at like 2 a.m. or just like late at night, but I feel like it's not quite as good as Five Guys, but I feel like it's like a tier slightly below Five Guys, but it's still really good. Like it's high quality. I would put it above Smash Burger and like burgers like that. Um, I think yeah, it's also been consistent. I think I've had it twice now. I had it in back in New Hampshire as well in Salem, but yeah, I think it's consistent. The burger's good, their fries are good, their shakes are good. So, in fact, I think their shakes are actually maybe the best in fast food, arguably. But yeah, they're consistent. I would shout out Shake Shack too. I think Shake Shack's good.
Yeah, it's like I got like a fudge brownie hot chocolate shake. So good. But yeah,
Immaculate.
overall, solid fast food. Definitely better than White Castle. But yeah, I haven't seen the Harold and Kumar movies, but I remember seeing one where there's like White Castle in the title of it.
Yeah, they go to White Castle and get burgers, but now that I've had White Castle, it feels like they made the wrong choice. They should have just went to McDonald's.
Yeah, McDonald's then. Yeah, I feel like when they made those movies, McDonald's was probably just starting to pop off.
Yeah, this was like the '90s, so it's like I don't know. That's like the supersize era. I don't know, but yeah, they fucked up. White Castle's ass. I feel like it was always ass, and it's even worse now. So they fucked up. But maybe I'll watch it this weekend and we'll talk about it. Unless if I wanted to watch a movie about old people dying or a cat having an orgy, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see. But
But we'll be
go
here to
ahead.
cover it on Wednesday, regardless, along with all the NFL news, all of the NBA news. We'll cover another draft as well. Hopefully, one that, well, actually, we already know it's going to be better than the 2015 draft because it's not the 2015 draft. So we'll talk about a new draft. We'll talk about what we've watched and all the latest NFL and NBA news.
All right, but most importantly, until then, make sure you subscribe so you can get notified when we drop a new short or live stream here in a going live. And hit the like button or dislike if you want to. And then, most importantly, until we release another video, stay brick.
Daybreak. Beautiful. I was afraid because this fucking bitch was fucking
Angel.
freaking out.